8.2 billion people got pulled off Earth and split into groups of 11, one group to a planet. The strong woke on green worlds with oceans and ore. I woke on a dead rock, 10 women around me and 5 already pregnant. My aspect flagged useless because it does nothing for the man who holds it. What the rich never saw is that a power built to reach the empty planets they were too rooted to touch turns the worst rock into the only launch pad that matters. So the dead rock group takes the empty worlds and outgrows every world that pitied us. If you're enjoying this so far, drop a like and hit subscribe. It honestly keeps these videos going. My name is Yoonhae Jin, and I am working a night console when it happens. The last red eye of the morning on my screen and a wet runway under it. My voice in a pilot's ear talking him down through the rain. The job has always made me the man who never sits in the cockpit, who saves the thing he can never reach by reading numbers off a board. Then every light on Earth goes out at once. The whole grid, the screens, the runway, the city behind it, dark in the same instant, and the black that drops over everything goes deeper than a power cut. It is the whole world switched off at the source. A flat voice rolls down out of that black and tells everyone listening that the seeding is complete, that humanity has been assigned, that we will develop our worlds or be drawn down. Then sight comes back, and the console is gone. I am standing on rock, bare gray rock under a cold iron sky. No green anywhere, no water, the air thin enough that my first full breath scrapes going down. 10 women stand near me in a loose ring, every one of them as lost as I feel, and the system speaks again in that same dead flat tone, this time only to us. It welcomes our group of 11. The voice names our world Sereth, development tier 0, the lowest figure it has on record. My aspect, it says, is the Lodestar System, classification cedar, no competitor precedent, and it gives me a warning I do not like, that this world cannot sustain its group, that the drawdown culls the lowest worlds first, develop or be drawn down. I do not panic, because panic is a thing I trained out of myself a long time ago at that console, where the moment your voice shakes the pilot's hands shake too. Counting is what I do instead. 11 of us. 1 man, 10 women. I walk the perimeter of the rock at an easy pace, and it takes me under 10 minutes to circle our whole world, a town-sized rock with no town on it, ringed by a horizon too close and a drop into nothing past the edge. Then I count the women a second time, and the second count is the one that lands, because 5 of them are carrying, at 5 different stages by the look of it, one of them far enough along that she moves with both hands pressed under the weight of it. 5 mothers. None of them able to fight, to run, to work a salvage line. On a rock the system just told me cannot feed its own group. A board hangs in the corner of my sight when I think to look for it, a ranking board. Every group in the cluster sorted by their world's development and their numbers, and a global chat scrolling beneath it that I can read at a glance, without anyone hearing me read it. I let my eye run down both. The chat is already alive, already loud, the rich groups boasting from green worlds with rivers they are naming after themselves. A group bragging that they woke ankle deep in topsoil, another counting veins of ore they have not even had to dig for yet. And threaded between the boasts, the mockery has already found us. Somebody clocked the tier 0 rock on the bottom of the board and the chat ran with it. They are calling us the rock group, the dead world. One handle, pleased with itself, christens us the nursery, points out that the bottom ranked group on the entire board is 1 man babysitting 10 women with half of them pregnant, and asks the channel how long the odds give us. The channel answers in days, and laughs. They are not wrong about the numbers, only about what the numbers mean, and I do not yet have the breath to spend explaining a thing I cannot prove. I close the chat and turn to the work in front of me, which is the only work a dead rock allows on the first morning, the inventory. We gather and pool what the seeding dropped with us, and it is thin. A few sealed crates of ration, some water, drums of it, not many. A scrubber pack feeding breathable air into the thin stuff over our heads, running off a charge I can already see ticking down. I read the gauges against 11 mouths, the old habit of fuel against distance. Weeks, not months, weeks of air, a little more water, a little more ration, and then the rock takes back the whole group and the 5 who are eating for 2. Besides the warning, the system has given me one thing, an aspect I do not understand yet, and I reach for it by feel, blind, hunting for the grip of it. The Lodestar System answers, and the first function it offers me is named Scan, and when I open it the world drops away beneath me and I am looking down. Not with my eyes, from orbit. The view holds me in a high cold place above Sereth, and the dead star it crawls around, my own rock a great pebble with 11 warm points on it, the cluster of small worlds strung out around the dead star within reach. I am back at a console again, back at the only thing I have ever been good at, reading a board, guiding things I cannot touch, except the board is now a solar system, and the things are worlds. And the memory comes up unbidden, surfacing whenever I am at a screen with lives on it, the one call that went wrong. A small aircraft, a voice in my ear that trusted me, weather closing, and a moment where my read of the screen and the thing it could not show me did not line up, and I talked to a man I never met and could not reach down into the ground instead of onto the runway. I carried it off that shift and I have carried it since. It is why I built the rule I run my life by, the only rule I brought intact through the seeding onto this rock. No one on my board dies. I am back on a board now with 11 lives on it and 5 of those lives doubled, and the rule does not change because the board got bigger. While I am up in that orbital view, one of the pregnant women is already on her knees in the gray dirt, and she is the reason I come back down to my body fast. Her bare hands lie flat on the dead ground, eyes shut, and where her fingers press the gray is going a faint impossible green. Crouching beside her, I hear her tell me that her aspect is called Green Hand, that she can coax life from ground that has none. Then she warns me before I get my hopes up. The ground here is dead all the way down, dead in a way she has never felt, and the most she can pull from it is a thread. Her name is Baek Seol, and pregnant or not, she is on her knees, doing the one productive thing anyone on this rock has managed all morning. I ask her how long she can stretch what she pulls, and she tells me days, not weeks, and not even that if our count keeps rising. Days. A thin green thread of food off a dead rock, bought with the strength of a woman who should be resting. And it buys us days. I tell her to stop before she spends herself, that days are days and I will not have her bleeding herself white for a thread on the first morning. And I set what she has given me against the clock. That night the cold comes down on Sereth hard, the dead star giving no warmth once the rock turns its face away, and we crowd the 11 of us close to the scrubber pack and the one heat source we have. The morning's read assumed 11 mouths at a steady rate, and 11 is the wrong number. 5 are eating for 2, breathing for 2, one far enough along that her body is building a whole second person out of rations I counted as one share. I run it again with the right multipliers, and the new figure puts a cold in my chest that has nothing to do with the dead star. Counted true, it is not weeks, it is days. A bad handful of them. So I go back up, I open scan again that night and hang up there above the rock. And this is the moment the thing the whole board calls useless earns its first real keep, because what I can see from up here, the rich on their green worlds cannot. They woke with a world apiece and an aspect that works their own ground, and not one of them can see past their own sky, looking down at their oceans and their ore and never once glancing up at the dark around them. I am looking at the dark around me. Across the cluster, my view sweeps every small world strung out around the dead star inside my reach, and I read each one the way the scan feeds it to me. Composition, hazards, whether anything already holds it. Most of them are as dead as Sereth, or worse, scoured down to slag. Then the scan settles on one and holds, and the read it gives me changes the shape of the whole night. A world within reach, a hop of a day or two by the scan's measure. Not light years, the system has placed us close enough to touch our neighbors. Uninhabited, no group sitting on it, no claim. In full, water under the surface in quantity, a real atmosphere. Or in the crust, the green flush of something living across whole stretches of it. Everything Sereth does not have, sitting on a world nobody owns. Hanging there over it, the cold in my chest turns into something else, because for the first time since the lights went out, the board in front of me has an answer on it. I come down and I do not say much, because a planner who promises before he has the means is just another voice in the chat. The group hears only the one thing I am sure of, that there is a world within reach with what we lack, and that the whole of our survival now turns on reaching it before this rock runs out. Relief and fear arrive on their faces at the same instant, because a way out you cannot reach yet is also just a clock running faster. I check the chat once before I sleep, out of the same habit that has me checking a board. Someone has dug up that the bottom ranked group holds the only aspect on the board the system tagged without a competitor figure, and instead of reading that as strange, they read it as proof the thing is worthless. An aspect so useless it has no rivals because nobody else got cursed with it. He is right about what it does for me. I close the chat without a word, because the world I just found over his head is mine to reach and his to never see. Getting there is the trouble. The scan showed me the world, but scan is sight alone, good for finding a place and useless for reaching it, and the only other thing the Lodestar offers me so far is more of the same looking. My group has to be on that world before the air on this one runs out, and between here and there is empty space, no craft, no ore on Sereth to build one from. Nothing but 11 people, a thinning scrubber, a handful of days. I have the read. What I do not have is the reach, and the clock does not care which one I am missing. By the third day, the scrubber charge is dropped past the point where the gauge pretends to be comfortable, and Baek Seol's green thread, for all the strength she pours into it, is a thread, a few mouthfuls a day off ground that fights her for every one. The two clocks do not line up. The slow work of getting off Sereth needs months, and the air needs days. And no amount of reading the board closes a gap that wide, unless the Lodestar has a function I have not opened yet. So I go back into the Lodestar system, and I push past scan, past the function I already know, and I find there is a second one waiting, locked behind a cost the system names plainly. It is called drop. The read tells me drop pulls a cache down out of orbit to the group, a sealed space chest of supply, and the system shows me the price in the same breath. A meter I had not paid attention to until now, Uplink, the energy the whole Lodestar runs on, slow to refill and quick to spend, and a single drop will take nearly the whole of what I have. This is a board with a fuel gauge of its own, and the question is never just whether I can. It is whether I can afford to, and have nothing left when the next danger comes. One drop now empties me, but one drop now might buy the days the slow plan needs, and a planner who hoards his fuel while his people stop breathing has read the board wrong. I spend it. The last of the uplink goes into a single drop, aimed at the rock at my own feet, and I tell the group to stand clear and look up. It comes down out of the dark within the day, a sealed cache out of orbit, and it lands on Sereth with a weight I feel through the soles of my boots. A space chest the size of a cargo container settled into the gray dirt with steam curling off its skin. We crack it together, all 11 of us crowded around it, and what is inside it is the first thing on this rock that answers the math instead of worsening it. Water, sealed and clean. Drums of it. Air scrubber stock and breathable reserve, enough to push the gauge back up out of the red and hold it there. Ration, dense and packed. Real food. Weeks of it. The kind of figure that turns a count of days back into a count of weeks. The cache is the lifeline the slow plan was missing. The fast clock catching up the slow one. And standing there over our supply, I read the new numbers and feel the days I was bleeding come back to me in one drop. A system ping reaches me while my hands are still on the cache, and it tells me what I half expected. Surviving the count by drop has woken the function for true. Drop is mine now. A hand I can put into orbit and pull supply down with once the uplink fills. Tonight, the rock under me holds steady under the thought. A place we can stand on long enough to do the harder thing. The harder thing is all a dead rock with a world in its sights allows. And I lay it out for the group that night over the first full ration any of us has eaten since Earth. The 5 who are eating for 2 finally eating their share without me counting every bite of it. I tell them what I found from orbit. A living world a short hop out. Water under it. Breathable air. Ore in the crust. All of it on ground nobody owns. Then I tell them what I have. An aspect that can see it and drop supply onto our heads but cannot move a single one of us across the dark between. The way off this rock will not fall out of orbit. We have to build it here out of what I can pull down and what this rock will give, and then we have to fly it to a world I can only point at. And that is a thing of months, not days. Which is the work the drop just bought us the time to do. One of the women has been quiet through the count, the cache, the plan, and she speaks up now, the first of the 10 to give me something to work with instead of something to protect. She tells me her aspect is called fabrication, that she can take raw material and worked scrap and shape it into parts, into structure, into a thing that holds, and that if I keep pulling caches down and the rock gives up anything at all, she can start. Her name is Yu Chaewon, and while the rest of us are still turning the plan over, she is already on her knees in the cache wreckage, with her hands on the torn hull plate of the space chest, reading it the way Bakeseal read the dirt, working out what the dropped scrap can become. I watch her sort the salvage into piles only she understands, a lander frame taking shape in a mind already 3 steps ahead of mine, and I get out of the way of the specialist the way a dispatcher does, and start working out what she will need next. So that is where the morning that started with a grave leads us by its 3rd night. 11 alive, the air back out of the red, a world in my sights, and a builder already cutting a lander out of the scrap I dropped. Sereth is a launch pad, and Chaewon's hands are already on the craft that will leave it. By the 4th morning, the dropped scrap is already half a frame. Yu Chaewon has been on her knees in the cache wreckage since before the dead star cleared the horizon, her hands moving over the torn hull plate of the space chest, and where she touches the metal it goes from junk to part, the edges truing, the warped plate flattening. A frame is taking shape under her fabrication that I could not have cut out of that mess in a month with every tool the rock does not have. What she is building is the first thing on Sereth that points off Sereth. It is a lander, squat, ugly, a cage of trued metal with a belly meant to hold a crew, and a skin meant to keep the dark out. She tells me without looking up that the frame she can finish today, that the bones of the thing are already mostly in her head, but that a frame is still a long way from a craft. Before I can name the gap, she pins it for me. The dropped scrap gave her hull plate bracing, enough worked metal to skin a frame. A lander that flies needs more than skin. It needs structure that holds under thrust, the dense drive parts that do not come folded inside a supply cache. And for those she needs ore, raw metal out of a crust. The crust under us is gray and dead all the way down. No veins of anything in it but more of itself. So the metal Chaewon needs has to come from off this rock, and raw ore is the lone resource I cannot drop. A space chest gives me supply, water, air, ration, worked scrap. But when I ask the Lodestar plainly for ore, the answer is the kind of silence that means no. That leaves the orbital view. I go up into the scan that night with the question sharpened down. Not where can we live, but where is there metal we can reach? And the cluster lays itself out under me. Every small world strung around the dead star, and I read each one against the new question. Most are dead the way Sereth is dead. Then the scan settles on a body close in, closer than the green world I am hoarding for later. A stripped moon barely worth the name. No air, no water, no life. Scoured down to bare metal-rich crust. And it gives me the reed I have been hunting. Ore in the open, a surface already cracked and broken, as though something tore the skin off it long ago and left the bones exposed. And in those bones, the dense metal Chewan's lander wants, lying there for anyone with a way to reach it. A hop of hours by the scan's measure, not the day or two out to the green world. A short jump across the cluster to a rock nobody owns and nothing guards. I set that moon aside while I am still hanging over it, because a body that reads as scoured and torn rather than simply poor, is a body that had something taken from it. And a robbed rock is a different thing from a barren one. The wrongness of it goes next to the other wrong thing the system has been holding over my head, and then I come back down, because the way to reach that ore is the same loop that eats its own tail. To build the lander I need ore, to fetch the ore I need a craft, and the craft I am building is the lander. The answer is the one it always is on a board where two aircraft want one runway. You do not get the whole solution, you get the smallest thing that flies, and you fly that. Chewan need not finish the lander to reach the moon. She needs something that crosses the shore hop once, carries a load of ore home, and survives the doing of it twice. So I come down and lay it out for the group at the morning ration. The 5 who are eating for 2 finally eating without me counting every bite, and I tell them the plan plainly, because a planner who hides the cost from the people paying it has already lost them. The metal we need is not on this rock. It sits on a stripped moon a few hours out, and to get there we have to fly there in a thing Chewan is still building. So the first craft off Sereth is a rough hauler, a throwaway thing whose only job is to go and fetch the parts the real lander is made of. We build a smaller, uglier thing first, and that thing builds the one that matters. One of the women, Jang Yuna, the square steady one who has said almost nothing, puts the risk in a flat voice I already like. We are betting the first flight any of us has ever taken on a craft thrown together in 2 days out of a fallen crate, and if it does not come back we have spent the days it cost and bought a grave on a second rock. She is right, and I tell her she is right, and then I tell her the alternative, which is to sit on Sereth with no metal and wait for the air to run out on a frame that never becomes a craft. The ore run is the move that buys the next one, and there is no other. Who flies it is the other half of the problem, because Chewan builds, she does not pilot, and a hauler crossing the dark between 2 rocks is not a thing I can talk down from a screen the way I once talked aircraft onto runways. One of the 10 settles that before I have to ask. She is slight, quick-eyed, holding the kind of stillness that comes off a person waiting to move, and she tells me her aspect is piloting. The moment she looks at a thing meant to move, she knows where it sits in the space around it, and where it wants to go, and the flying of it is a sense she was handed whole, there in her the first time she tried. Her name is Nari. I ask her the only question that matters, whether she can take a rough hauler across a short hop to a moon she has never seen, and bring it home loaded, and she does not boast. She tells me yes, that the craft is the one part she is unsure of, and the flying is the part she is sure of, which is the most pilot thing anyone has said to me since the lights went out. A builder, a pilot, and a man in orbit who can see the moon and never touch it. That is the team, and I feel it settle the way a good crew settles around a board. Each of us doing the one thing only we can do and trusting the others to do theirs. The work of getting off Sereth runs through all 3 of us at once, or it does not run at all. What it needs first is more metal than 2 cracked space chests gave us, even for the rough thing, and I get metal the same place I got the water in the air. I have to drop again. The uplink has crawled back since the first drop, not to full, not close, and what has gathered is enough for one more cache and almost nothing past it. That first night I spent the whole reserve without hesitating, because the alternative was the group not breathing. This is a colder call, because we are breathing now and I am about to spend my entire reserve getting off a rock we can survive on, betting the moon run goes clean and nothing comes at us while I am dry. I spend the drop. The last of the uplink goes out of me and the meter bottoms out, and I tell the group to stand clear and look up. And within the day, a sealed cache comes down out of the dark and settles into the gray dirt with steam curling off its skin, heavier than the first one. We crack it open, and this time the cache gives mass instead of water or ration. Worked metal and plate, bar, rod, raw stock, and salvage. The body of a craft folded down into a box. Chewan is into it to the shoulder before the steam is cleared, sorting each piece by feel faster than I can name what she is holding. A system ping reaches me while my hands are still on the cold cache, and the first part of it is what I expected. That surviving by drop a second time has settled the function for true. The part I do not expect comes under it, and it is the reason I stop with my palm flat on the plate and read the line a second time, because the second read does not soften it. My group has been tagged again, and the tag is the same one, and it still makes no sense. Cedar class. No competitor precedent. Every other group on the board woke with an aspect the system could weigh against 10,000 others, a number it could rank. My aspect has no number on it. The board that sorts every group in the cluster by what its aspect can do cannot read mine at all, and the system's own answer for why is a phrase it offers like an explanation, that there is no precedent to measure me against, that whatever Cedar class is, The board has never once seen another. So I do the only thing a man can do with a wrong thing he cannot solve. The thing I did with the call that went into the ground. I file it. I set the Cedar class tag and the unreadable aspect down side by side. In the place I keep what does not add up yet. The robbed look of that moon already sitting in the same drawer. Then I lock the panel, because Chaewon needs metal sorted and a moon needs reaching. The chat decided an aspect with no rivals is one so worthless nobody else got cursed with it. I am starting to think they read it backwards, and with nothing to prove that, I keep it behind my teeth and go back to work. The hauler comes together over 2 hard days because Chaewon does not build the way a person builds. She persuades the metal into the shape it can hold and lets it set. What rises out of the cache wreckage in the dropped stock is squat, graceless, exactly as ugly as I warned the group it would be. A box with a drive and a sealed skin and seats, built across to the moon and drag itself home, heavy and nothing more. She walks me around it when it is done, and she is honest about it the way she is honest about everything, that it will fly and that she would not trust it past the moon, that every weld in it is one she made because she had to, and not because she wanted to. I tell her the box only has to do one job. She tells me a craft that only has to do one job is exactly the kind that finds out it has 2, and she is not wrong, and she has clearly thought harder about this than I have. We take the moon run on a morning the uplink is still nearly dry, Nari at the controls and Jang Yuna with us for the hands the work needs, which is a risk I weigh and accept, because the moon will not move closer and the air clock does not stop for my reserve to fill. Bake Seal's green thread keeps the rock fed while we are gone, and Min Haeun, the quiet one whose aspect I have not yet had cause to lean on, keeps the rest steady on the ground, and I climb into the ugly box with my crew and feel the wrongness of being inside a craft instead of above one. Then Nari lifts us off Sereth, and the moment the skin leaves the rock I am back up in the scan in my head even with my body bolted into a seat. Because that is the only place I am any use. I run the moon up to her as she flies. The path, the broken crust, the open ground where the ore lies bare. The faces the scan reads as sound footing, and the faces it reads as a long fall. The hop is short the way the system makes everything short. Hours and not the years a real crossing of that dark would cost. The world's wound close enough around the dead star that the moon hangs near enough to reach in a morning. Nari threads us in over the stripped crust with a touch the welds do not deserve, reading the box's drift, and the moon's thin pull and the open ground rushing up, and she sets the rough thing down on a shelf of sound rock at the lip of one of the long wounds in the surface. We are on a robbed moon with no air and a craft that holds it, and below us in the torn ground is the metal Chaewon needs, scored out in seams where the old harvest left the harder veins it could not be bothered to take. The work is grim and fast, and I run it from inside my own skull, scanning the seams ahead of the women on the ground, reading which open faces are sound and which are a slide waiting to go. I call Yuna off a shelf a breath before it drops, talking both of them across the broken crust the way I once talked aircraft down a glide path, except these are voices I can reach and lives I can save. They pry the seams loose and load the ore into the hauler, raw stock and the cleaner exposed metal both. More mass than the box was built to lift. Chaewon's voice is in my ear from Sereth the whole time, telling me what is worth carrying and what is dead weight, sorting the moon's gut by feel from a planet away, until the belly is loaded past sense and Nari tells me flatly that the box will fly home, but it will not enjoy it. It does not enjoy it. The hop back is the ugly thing earning every cruel word Chaewon said about it, the loaded hauler wallowing in Nari's hands, the welds I cannot see doing the praying she built them to do. I sit in my seat with the orbital view running in my head and do the one thing I can, read the path home clean, and feed it to Nari a beat ahead of her needing it. The air clock on Sereth ticks the whole way, because the run was always a race against the reserve I spent to start it. Nari sets us down heavy, rough, whole, and the second the skin is open and the dead moon ore is on the gray dirt under Chaewon's hands, the system pings me, and this is the one I have been climbing toward without knowing the rung had a name. It tells me a function has woken. Launch. The read unrolls in my head the way scan and drop did, and where scan only looks and drop only pulls, launch reaches. It lets me take a craft my group has built and guide it, lift it, set its path, hold it through a crossing from the orbital view, the commander's function, the thing that turns a builder's frame and a pilot's hands into a ship. I can actually run from above. I understand it the moment I have it, because it is the console all over again, except the board is a solar system and the thing I am guiding is a craft with my people inside it. Reaching that moon woke it. I note it and move on, the wage paid out the moment I prove I will use the tool. Chaewon never stops to mark the unlock. She is already into the dead moon ore the way she was into the cache, and now she has metal enough to do it right. The thing rising out of the salvage under her hands over the next stretch is the lander, built right. The craft that takes us to a living world and holds together. I watch her work and I run the count in my own head. One stripped moon scraped, one rough hauler flown and survived, one real lander taking shape, A tier 0 rock that a handful of mornings ago was a grave with a clock on it now holding a builder, a pilot, a commander, and a craft. The lander is finished and fueled. On the morning I take the green world out of the place I had made myself stop looking at it. Chaewon walks me around the craft the way she walked me around the box, and this time she does not list the prayers. She tells me it will hold, that the dead moon ore made the difference, that she would put her own life into this one, and is about to. Nari runs a hand down the hull and tells me she can fly it. I go up into the orbital view one last time before we commit, and the scan holds me high over Sereth and the dead star and the small worlds wound around it, and I let my eye go at last to the one I have been building towards since the first night. The green world, a hop-out, water under it, air worth breathing, the green flesh of something living across whole stretches of ground that belongs to no group on the board. Ours to reach now, with a craft to carry us, a function to fly it, a pilot to thread it, and a builder to trust. The first true uninhabited world the scan ever found me, the first place my group might actually live, and the lander is pointed at it. Nari lifts us off Sereth into the dark with a touch the lander does not deserve, and the moment the gray rock falls away under the hull, I am back in the orbital view in my head, my body bolted into a seat and my real work somewhere above all of it. The green world hangs out there ahead of us, a short hop the way the system makes everything short, and Nari has the line already, the lander's nose coming around to the green. I run the path up to her as she flies, the drift, the thin pull of the dead star, the face of the green world turning toward us. She threads the lander down the line. I feed her with a steadiness that tells me Chaewon built this one right. The hull holds. Under it, the drive holds. Behind me in the crew space, the other women hold too. Chaewon with her hands already half closed around tools she has not pulled yet. Jang Yuna square and silent in her straps. And I watch the green grow in the scan, a flush across distant ground sharpening into a world we are about to stand on. It is a jungle. That is the first thing the scan gives me as we drop in close. A world skinned over in living growth. The growth is wrong in a way the orbital read did not warn me about, because the cover is fungus, not leaf or trunk. Towering pale stalks and broad shelves and bone-white caps thrown up across whole valleys. A forest grown out of rot. Water sits under it in quantity. The air over it is thick and breathable. Heady with spores the scan is already flagging. An ore runs in the crust beneath the fungal floor. Every resource Sereth has begged for sitting on a world the board lists as belonging to no group. Uninhabited, the scan has called it every time I looked, and that single read is where the system got it wrong. Nari sets us down on a clearing of bare crust, at the foot of the nearest fungal ridge, the lander's belly settling onto sound ground, and the second the skin opens onto the green world, the scan's mistake walks out of the tree line. I see it from above first, a shape detaching from the base of a pale stalk, then a second, then 6 more. They come low and many-legged and pale as the fungus they were born under. Fauna the orbital read missed because it weighed the world for resources and life flush, and never weighed what kind of life held it. The scan calls a world empty when no group holds it, and whatever was already living there before any group came does not show in that read. On a world skinned in fungus, those things are pale and patient, and they do not like the noise our lander made coming down. I call it to the group in the time I have, which is almost none, that there is fauna, that it is coming, that the clearing is about to stop being clear. Chaewon is already out with the claim beacon in her hands, a thing she built across 2 nights out of the dead moon ore, and a core the Lodestar fed her, the device that plants a claim and pipes a world's resources home. The trouble is plain the instant I see it against the pale shapes pouring out of the tree line. Planting a beacon takes time, ground cleared and held, a stretch of minutes where Chaewon can kneel and work without a hand laid on her, and the world has just told us it has no intention of giving her those minutes. This is the part of the claim the scan never showed me, a fight on the ground, in the one place I can never be. That is the wall I have run into from the start, and it is no thinner here for being 100 hops from Sereth. I win from above, and in none of it do I ever lay a hand on the thing trying to kill my people. The old helplessness comes up in me again, the dispatcher who can see the aircraft losing the runway, and can only talk into a headset and hope the hands on the far end do what his voice asks. Except these are hands I can reach. Yuna is already moving to the front of the clearing, putting herself between the fauna and the kneeling builder, and her aspect alone stands between a claim and a grave. Her aspect is bulwark. She told me how it worked back on Sereth, that she can harden her own body and hold a line, that she is the wall the group sets where a wall is needed. And on a dead rock with nothing to wall against, she has been the square quiet one waiting for a use. The use has arrived. She plants herself at the mouth of the clearing, and the first of the pale shapes hits her, and she holds, her skin gone hard under the aspect, the blow turned. I am reading her from above, though, and I can see what she cannot. There are not 8 of them, 40, rather, more coming out of the fungal dark behind the 40, a tide of pale, many-legged things drawn by the lander, and the heat of 11 warm bodies on a world that has not held warm bodies in a long time. Yuna can hold one line against a few, and a wall that holds the front holds nothing once the tide comes around the sides. So I do the only thing left in me to do, which the Lodestar has been building toward all along without telling me its name. I reach past scan and past drop and past launch into the part of the system I have not opened, and I find a function waiting there behind the same uplink cost everything carries. The read of it unrolls in my head the moment I touch it. Relay. Where scan looks and drop pulls and launch reaches, relay links. It takes the group and threads them together through the satellite net, my orbital read feeding all 10 of them at once, and it does a second thing past the threading. Through that same link I can take the aspect of one of my people and push power into it, amplify it, lift a ground aspect past what its holder can do alone. The commander's function. What turns 10 separate women on a hostile world into one network with a man in orbit running every thread. I do not stop to marvel at it. Chaewon is kneeling, the tide is turning the flank, and I have a wall that needs to be bigger. I spend the uplink and I link them. The clearing snaps together in my view, every woman a warm point threaded to every other, and all of them threaded to me. And then I find Yuna in the net and I push. Her bulwark answers. Through the satellite net I feel the boost land on her, her hardened skin going harder, the line she holds widening past her own body to a wall she could never have raised alone, and the pale tide that should have rolled around her flank breaks on a barrier suddenly twice the width it was. She feels it the instant it lands. I hear her in the link, the shock running through someone who set her body to die holding a gap and felt the gap close instead, and then she stops bracing to fail and starts bracing to win, and the wall holds. 40 pale shapes throw themselves at a line one woman should not be able to keep, and they do not get past her, because she holds it as more than herself now. One woman lifted on a satellite net by a commander reading the whole field from above. While she holds the front, I work the rest of the field. Through the link I can feed every one of them at once, and I do. I call Nari back to the lander to keep the drive warm in case we have to lift. The other hands I set where the flank is thinnest, reading the fungal dark for the next surge, before it comes out of the tree line, and naming it a breath before it arrives. Yuna gets a boost no one else does, and I hold it on her anyway, because the whole claim turns on her line and spreading it thin to feel fair would lose the field. My scan catches the second danger while my attention is on the wall, and for half a breath it nearly costs me. The spores I clocked on the way in have spread well past the canopy now, thickening on the clearing floor where the heat of the fight has stirred them up. A pale haze rising off the disturbed ground, and the scan reads them climbing toward a level the women's lungs will not take. Pale fauna is only the front of the trap. Behind it, the world itself is the rest, the air going against us the longer we stand on it. I feel the old call surface again in the back of my skull. The small aircraft in the weather I read a beat too slow, and I do not let it land this time, because I have the read early and a function to spend on it. Through the link, the instant the uplink lets me, I pull a drop, a small one, scrubber stock and sealed reserve aimed at the clearing instead of at Sereth, and it comes down out of orbit onto the cleared ground where Chaewon kneels. The reserve cracks open over the beacon sight and pushes a pocket of clean air down across the work, enough for her to keep her hands moving while the haze rises around the edges of it. I am spending uplink in two places at once now, the boost on Yuna and the air on Chaewon, and the meter is dropping toward a floor I do not want to hit. On a hostile world, there is no claim if the builder cannot breathe, and no breathing if the wall does not hold. So I carry both threads and refuse to drop either until the work is done. She holds the wall. Chaewon, in the pocket of clean air I am pouring down on her, plants the beacon. It goes into the crust of the green world and the moment it takes the scan, changes the label on the world under me, the empty tag falling off it, a new one settling in its place. Claimed. The line of resources the system promised me the first night opens at once. I feel it before I read it. The green world's water and its air and its ore registering home to Sereth through the Lodestar net. A planet's worth of what we lack piping back across the dark. One beacon in the crust of one world, and a tier 0 rock 100 hops away now pulls real resources home off a living world. The pale tide, finding nothing to feed on and a barrier it cannot break, draws back into the fungal dark it came from, and Yuna lets the wall down by degrees, and the clearing goes quiet, and the claim is ours. A ping comes in from the system while my hands are still on the lander's seat straps, and I half know what it will say before I read it, because nothing the Lodestar gives me comes free. All of it is a wage that lands only after I have spent for it. Relay is mine now, settled for true the way drop and launch settled. A function I can reach for again once the uplink fills, the link and lift that just held a claim no single aspect could have held. I tuck it away where every wind goes. Yuna finds me before the lander is even powered down, still breathing hard from the wall, and she wants to know what I did to her out there, because she felt it the moment it landed, and she has no word for it. I tell her the plain shape of the thing, that the Lodestar can take her aspect and push my reach into it, that the wall she raised was hers and the scale of it was mine, and that the two together are the group from now on. She turns that over with the flat care she turns everything over, and then she gives me the part she cannot get past. For one moment out there, she felt every other woman in the clearing inside the link with her, felt where they stood and what they carried, felt me reading the field over all of them at once. She has never in her life been less alone, holding a line. None of it does, she say, is a small thing. On a board that has called us the useless aspect for 3 nights running, the wall that held the green world just learned what the useless aspect actually does, and she carries that look back to the others on the rock. Then I run the count, because counting is what I do, and it falls out different now than it did the first morning. 1 world claimed. The green world's resources flowing home, and in the scan, strung out around the dead star inside my reach, 3 more uninhabited worlds the read flags as reachable. 3 more beacons I could plant if the uplink fills and the craft holds, and my people survive the things the scan does not bother to count. A tier 0 rock with 1 claimed world feeding it is a rock climbing the board, and the chat has not noticed yet, because the chat never looks up. We do not claim the next world that day, because there is a thing to do first that the group has not done since Earth, and I will not skip it. The resources come home, while the light on the green world fails, the lander loaded and lifted by Nari back across the short dark to Sereth. I watched the claim work from above the whole flight back, the green world stores registering as a steady draw into the Lodestar net. Water, air, ore, worked mass, all of it crossing the dark to a rock that has only ever counted what it was about to run out of. The scan gives me a figure on it, and the figure is the first one since the seeding that climbs instead of falls. Stores at Sereth, rising. I have read 100 gauges run the other way, all of them ticking down toward a floor, and this one ticks up, and I sit in the lander with that number in front of me and let it be the realest thing on my board. When we set down on the gray rock, the colony is already changed. The drums of water off the green world's underground sit full where the dropped caches used to ration them out a cup at a time. That air gauge that has lived in the red or near it since we woke here reads thick and breathable, the green world's heavy atmosphere piping into the scrubber net, and now the 11 of us breathe without the back of my mind counting the charge down. Bake Seal's thin green thread off the dead ground is still there, still hers, but a thread is not the whole table anymore. The green world grows things, real growth out of its fungal floor that the claim pipes home as mass. And that night we set it all out and we eat. We eat the way none of us has eaten since the lights went out on Earth. I lay the food out and I do not count it, and that is the strangest part of the whole night for me, because I have counted every gram of ration since the first morning. Every share I have weighed against 11 mouths and the 5 who are eating for 2, and the air gauge in the days. Tonight I set it down and I let them eat their fill, and I do not run the math once. Bake Sale eats. She has spent every morning on her knees, bleeding her strength into dead ground for a few mouthfuls, and tonight she eats until she is full and then takes a little more. I watch her do it and feel something unknot in my chest that has been pulled tight since the day I counted her among the mouths and called her 2. The 5 who are eating for 2 finally eat enough. That is what the rule was always about underneath, because no one on my board dies covers the slow death too, the one that comes accounted gram at a time. And tonight, at last, that part of the rule actually holds. I have spent every night since the first morning doing the arithmetic of how slowly I could let them starve without it showing. Shaving a share here, calling a half portion enough, watching the most heavily carrying of them go to sleep still hungry because the gauge would not stretch to one more bite. None of that math runs tonight. The 5 eat until they stop, not until I stop them. And the difference between those two things is the whole distance from the rock that woke us to the colony we are becoming. I sit a little apart from them with the orbital view gone quiet in the back of my head, and I watch the feast happen. The 11 of us crowded close to the heat source we have crowded around every night. The crowding tonight has a different weight to it though. Other nights we pressed in to share the last of a thing. Tonight we press in around plenty, and that changes the whole air over the rock. Min Haeun, the quiet one whose aspect I have not yet had cause to lean on, moves among the pregnant 5 as they eat, a hand on a shoulder here, a low word there, reading their bodies the same close way she reads everything. I see her note who is tired and who is heavy, and who is closer to her term than the rest, filing it against the clock she can feel, and I can only count toward. Chaewon eats with the claim beacon's spare core still in her lap, 3 steps ahead of the rest of us already, sketching the next craft in a mind that does not stop. Neri eats fast and light, ready to fly again before the food is cold. Yuna eats the most of any of us and has earned every bite, the wall that held the green world's tide sitting at the table she held it for. I lay the snowball out in my own head while the others eat, because that work is mine alone. 1 world claimed, piping resources home. 3 more in scan range, flagged for water or ore or living ground, reachable by the craft Chaewon can build, and the function I just unlocked to fly it. The break on all of it is the uplink, the tank that empties when I claim and fills at its own grudging pace. So the limit on how fast we grow is never the world's, it is the tank and the people I cannot replace, and the time the air clock gives us. Run those 3 against the worlds and the answer still climbs, because each claim I land pays back more than the uplink it cost, and a colony that started counting its last grams is suddenly the only group in the cluster whose stores rise every time it spends. But the snowball is not the most fragile thing on my board tonight, and I know it before the feast is even over, because I have been counting the wrong clock all along. The air clock and the water clock and the food clock have all turned the green world, bought each of them down off the red. Underneath all of them, ticking since the first morning, runs the one I have been holding off, because until tonight I had no margin to face it. Min Haeun catches my eye across the heat source while Baek Seol shifts her weight with both hands pressed under the swell of her, and Haeun gives me a small look that says what her reading has already told her. The most advanced of the 5 is close. That swell Baek Seol has carried since before the seeding is near its term, and the thing the colony has been too busy starving to face has run out of room to wait. The dead rock is fed, its air is thick, and the first of the 5 is due, which turns the whole of this operation, the scan and the claim and the satellite net and the feast we just ate, toward the single most fragile pair of lives on the board, a mother and a child. Keeping them both alive is the next thing I cannot do from orbit, and I will have to find a way to do it anyway. The feast is barely cleared when Min Hoon comes to me away from the heat source and tells me, lo, that it is starting. Baek Seol has been quiet through the meal, quieter than even her usual, and Haeun read it off her before any of the rest of us would have. The tightening that comes and goes, the way she has been pressing both hands under the weight of the child and breathing through something none of us could see. I ask Haeun how long and she does not give me a number. Bodies do not run on a count the way my gauges do, she tells me, and this one is early enough into the night that it could be hours yet or could turn fast. The only thing she can promise me is that it has begun and will not stop now until it is finished. One way or the other. She says the last part flat, because she is the one of us who has to think about the second way, and she will not lie to me to make my chest easier. I tell her she runs this, that I will get her anything she names and stay out of the place where her hands work, and she holds my eye a moment and tells me there is one thing I should know, before I make her that promise. This is the first one of these she has done on a world like this. Half-built, thin-aired, with nothing around her she did not have to ask the dead rock to give. Her mending reads a body and knits it. But a hard birth is hours of a thing going right or going wrong, while she watches for the turn, beyond what her mending can simply close. And on this rock she has no margin under her if it goes wrong. I tell her she has me, which is the truth, and is also not nearly enough, and we both know it. So the whole operation that an hour ago was a colony counting its first full stores, turns in the space of one quiet sentence toward the most fragile pair of lives the board has ever set in front of me. A mother and a child not yet born. The 2 of them on a rock that learned to feed itself 3 days ago, with a medic who has never done this here, and a man in orbit who cannot lay a single hand on either of them. I have spent every part since the seeding learning that I win from above and never on the ground, and the lesson has never cut the way it cuts now, because there is no scan that reads a labor, and no drop that delivers a child. What I can do is everything around them, and I start doing it before the night is an hour older. The first thing I do is clear the ground. Every night since we woke, the colony has slept crowded against the one heat source. 11 bodies pressed close for warmth, and for the animal comfort of it. And that is the wrong place for what is coming. Haeun needs warmth, light, clean air, and room, and she needs the rest of the group out of the small space where she works and not underfoot. I set Chaewon to it, because the thing I need is a structure, and Chaewon is the one who makes structures out of nothing, and she has the claimed world's piped mass to work with now instead of 2 cracked space chests. She raises a shelter against the lee of the rock in under an hour. A low, hard-walled room off the main scrubber net with its own feed of the green world's thick air, sealed against the cold the dead star drops on us once the rock turns its face away. It is the first thing anyone has built on Sereth that is not a way off Sereth. And I note that without saying it, because a colony that builds a place for a child to be born in is a colony that has decided it is staying. While Chaewon walls the room I go up, I open scan out of the habit that has kept us alive 4 parts running, the planner's reflex to read the whole board before the danger names itself. And I sweep the rock and the cluster and the dead star for anything moving toward the worst night to have it move. For a while the board reads quiet, the green world piping home, the 3 reachable worlds sitting where they sat, nothing in the dark between bending toward us. Then the scan catches the thing I did not want it to catch, and my chest goes cold the way it went cold the first morning when I recounted the mouths and the weeks turned to days. There is a flicker on the ranking board, low down where my group lives, the same flicker the chat shrugged off as a glitch the night of the feast. Except up close in the scan it is not the board glitching. It is the drawdown. I have known the word since the first morning. The system gave it to me in the same flat breath it named the rock. Develop your world or be drawn down. And for 4 parts it has been a threat with no face. A slow tide the outline of my survival was built around, without my ever seeing it move. Now I see it move. The scan reads it as a pressure, a thing leaning on the lowest worlds on the board, and Sereth sits at the very bottom of that board, A tier 0 rock the call has every reason to reach for first. What comes at us is the board itself deciding which worlds are too weak to keep. No craft and no tide of pale fauna this time. And tonight, the one night I have a mother and an unborn child and no margin to spare, the pressure on the lowest rank ticks upward. Under the cull pressure sits a small line I had never had cause to look at, because for 4 parts I read the board is ranked by development alone, and never once asked what the other half of the figure was. The other half is population. A board does not sort groups by their world only. It sorts them by their world and their numbers both, and the drawdown reaches for the worlds that are lowest on the sum of the two. My group has been the lowest world on the board since we woke here. Tier 0, a dead rock. And the only thing that has kept the cull a slow tide instead of a present danger is the one figure the chat has spent weeks writing off as dead weight. 11 mouths, 5 of them doubled. On a board that counts numbers as half of survival, the 5 pregnancies are half of the sum that has kept us off the floor of the cull list this whole time, the opposite of the burden the chat takes them for. I sit up over the rock with that landing in me, and the cold in my chest changes shape, because the drawdown leaning harder on us tonight, and a child about to be born tonight, are the same event read from 2 sides. The cull is reaching for the weakest sum on the board, and in the walled room Chaewon just built, my group is about to add 1 to its numbers. I do not get to sit with the size of that, because Hoon's voice reaches me through the link the instant I have it open, telling me she needs me down and reading, not up and marveling. Back into my body I go, and into the room. It is warm now, lit, the green world's thick air feeding it steady, and baked seal is on the low pallet Chaewon raised. This is the same woman who spent every morning of the first days on her knees in dead gray dirt, bleeding her strength into the ground, for a thread of food. Tonight she is doing the harder work of building a whole person out of her own body, on a rock that nearly could not feed her to this night. Hoyoon is at her side with both hands on her, reading her the close way she reads everything, and she names what she needs, without looking up. The room is right and the air is holding. What she does not have is the rest of it, the things a medic needs around her that a dead rock and a fungal jungle world have never once handed us. She lists them fast. Clean water in quantity, held warm, clean cloth, a sealed clamp and a blade she can trust, and a reserve to keep the room's air steady if the night runs long, and the scrubber feed wavers. None of it grows on Sereth. All of it has to come from where everything on this rock comes from. Out of orbit on my uplink, and I have a meter to read before I can promise her a single item of it. The uplink has crawled back since the claim, not to full, and what has gathered is enough for a drop and not much past it. Spending the whole of it on Hoen's supply and having nothing left is the move I cannot make, because the drawdown is leaning on the bottom of the board tonight, and an emptied uplink is a lodestar that cannot do the one other thing the night might demand of it. I have to deliver a drop into that walled room and hold reserve against the cull at the same time, on a tank that does not stretch to both with room to spare. 2 aircraft wanting 1 runway in the same minute, and the answer is the one it always was. You spend the smallest amount that does the job and keep the rest in your hand. So I spend a drop, aimed not at the rock at large but into the cleared ground beside the shelter, and I make it the one Heian named and nothing more. Water held warm, sealed cloth, a clamp and a blade she could trust, scrubber reserved to steady the room. The cache comes down out of the dark within the hour and settles onto the gray dirt with steam curling off its skin. One by one the women carry it into her, and Hoen has her hands on warm clean water on a dead rock, a thing Sereth could never have given her on its own on the night it was asked. And while the cache is still warm, the memory comes up, the way it always comes up when I am at a board with a life on it I cannot reach. I have told the group this once already, the night shift console, the call that went into the ground, the rule I run them all by, and I will not tell it the same way twice, because the men who survive on this rock do not need me whining the same wound at them every part. What comes up tonight is the part of it I have never said aloud to anyone. The aircraft that I talked into the ground was not carrying one life. In the seat behind the pilot was his wife, and a child she was carrying. A thing he mentioned to me on the open channel in the calm part of the approach. Easy and proud, because the night was long and the voice in his headset was the only company he had. My read of the weather came a beat too slow and the screen could not show me the thing that killed them. So I did not talk down one stranger I never met. I talked down 3, and one of the 3 never got the chance to be born. 1 death I carried off that shift in the official count. I have always carried 3. That is the real shape of the rule. The thing under no one on my board dies. That I have never said that the worst night of my old life was a mother and an unborn child I could see on a screen and could not reach. Tonight the board has set the exact same pair of lives in front of me again and dared me to do it right this time. I do not tell Haeun any of that. What I tell her is that the water is warm and the air is holding and I am reading the whole rock around her. And then I get out of the doorway of the place where her hands work. The night runs long, the way Hoen warned me it might. I hold the 2 threads she left me, the room and the rock, and I do not let either of them drop. Inside the walled room, her mending works the way I once watched her aspect work on smaller things. A hand reading a body and easing what it reads. Except a hard birth takes hours, her hand reading the body and easing what it can while she waits for the turn. And she waits. I keep the air steady. Twice the scrubber feed off the green world wavers as the night cold leans on the net. Both times I have a pocket of reserve from the cash to push into the room before the dip reaches the place where it would matter, spending the small cashes Chaewon set aside rather than the uplink I am holding against the call. I keep the rest of the group placed where each is useful and clear of Hyun's space. Chaewon on the shelter seals, Nari ready at the lander in the one case I will not name even to myself. That is the case where the rock fails tonight and I have to lift a laboring woman off it, and I keep the others steady, warm, and quiet against it. And I keep the orbital view running under all of it, my scan on the drawdowns lean. Because the one promise I made Hyun was that nothing would reach this room from outside while she worked, and the only way I keep that promise is to see the thing coming before it arrives, and have uplink left to answer it. It tries to arrive past the deepest part of the night. The drawdown's pressure, which had been a slow lean on the bottom of the board, sharpens, and the scan reads the coal beginning to fix on the weakest sum in its reach, which is us. Our Tier 0 world with 11 souls and a long night between it and morning. This is the danger drawn to the moment, the thing the outline of my survival has been built around without my seeing its face, and it has chosen the one night I have baked seal and an unborn child on a pallet to choose. I cannot fight it, there is no craft to shoot down and no wall to raise. The drawdown is the board itself deciding we are too weak to keep. What I can do is the only move I have ever been able to make. I can change the number the board is reading. The coal fixes on the lowest sum of world and people. I cannot lift the world tonight, but the people are about to change, and the timing of the two is no accident I am willing to leave to chance. So I read both clocks the way a dispatcher does when two are about to collide, and I hold the line until they cross in the right order. I hold the room. Through the link I feel the night narrow toward its turn. Hyun's reading going taut as the thing that has been going right for hours reaches the place where it goes right or goes wrong for good. I keep the air clean, the cold out. The drawdowns lean off the door, spending the last of what I dare against the call while the meter drops toward a floor I do not want to touch on this of all nights. And then, in the walled room Chaewon built against the lee of a dead rock, with warm water from orbit and a medic who had never done this here, and a mother who learned to coax life from ground that had none, the child is born. I hear it through the link before Hyun says a word. The first sound a person makes, thin, furious, alive, the most ordinary sound in the long history of our species, and the least ordinary thing that has ever happened on Sereth. Hyun's voice comes after it, steadier than I have heard her all night, telling me the mother is whole and the child is whole, and both of them are breathing the green world's thick air on a rock that 3 days ago could not feed them. Baekseol is exhausted past speaking and alive, the child on her chest, and the rule I have run this group by since before the seating holds, for the hardest pair of lives it has ever had to hold, a mother and a child, both of them through the night, both of them mine and on my board and alive. I sit in my own skull with the orbital view gone quiet, and I let it land. The one thing I can never do from orbit done anyway. Through Hyun's hands and Chaewon's walls and a cache I pulled out of the dark. Every one of us did the single thing only we could do, the way a crew works aboard. 3 lives I carried wrong out of my old world. 2 lives carried right out of this one. The arithmetic does not balance, and it is not supposed to, but it is the closest I have come to setting that old weight down. And I let myself feel the difference for as long as the night allows, which is not long, because the board is already moving. My ranking board ticks the instant the child draws its first breath, and I am watching it when it does, because I have been reading the drawdowns lean off that same board all night. That flicker the chat shrugged off as a glitch. The pressure I read is the cull fixing on the weakest sum. All of it changes in the moment our number changes. 11 becomes 12. On the board that sorts every group in the cluster by world and by numbers both, the sum the drawdown was reaching for is suddenly not the lowest in its reach. One of the half of the figure the channel calls dead weight just became a whole person, and the rock that sat dead last on the coal list lifts off the very bottom of it. The coal's lean, which had sharpened toward us through the deepest part of the night, eases. I changed the number it was reading, which is the only kind of fighting the drawdown gives me, and a child born on a Tier 0 rock moves that number the right way like nothing else in the cluster can, on the worst possible night to need it moved. Population is armor the way the aspect they called useless was never useless. A world I cannot develop fast holds me down on the development half of the figure, but the numbers half I can move, and 5 pregnancies make us the fastest climbing numbers in the cluster. The 5 the chat calls dead weight are the armor that has kept us alive from the start, and the first of them just proved it. I check the chat once and find it doing what I expected, certain the system is glitching on a group too poor to register. The thing they are reading as the board breaking is a child breathing on a rock they pitied. I close it without answering, the way I close it every part. My colony steadies in the days after, and the steadying is its own kind of unlock. A group that has been bracing against a clock since the first morning, the air clock and the water clock and the food clock, and under all of them the clock of the birth I had been holding off because we had no margin to face it, sets that last clock down, and the whole rock breathes differently for it. Baek Seol mends under Hyun's hands faster than I would have dared hope, her green hand already itching to get back to the ground now that the ground gives back. The child does the one thing a newborn does, which is exist and be guarded, and the guarding settles the group around a center it did not have before, a thing on the rock that is purely the future and nothing else. Hyun moves among the other four who are carrying with a new sureness in her reading, because she has done one of these here now and knows the rock will hold for the next, though the next is months out yet. The four of them at earlier stages than Baek Seol was. Their night's still well ahead. I watch Hyun set that against a clock only she can feel, and I do not rush her, because the births are a thing that come at the body's pace and not my gauges, and there are 4 more nights like this one waiting across the season. The system marks the steadying the way it marks everything, with a wage that wakes only once I have spent for it. A line opens in the corner of my sight while I am up in the orbital view reading the east coal off the board, and it tells me a thing has changed in the scan. Not a new function this time, but the function I have leaned on since the first night opening wider, its reach extending past the close cluster it could read before, the last rank of place I can stand on now instead of a cliff edge. The read unrolls the way it always does, the scan range pushing out from the tight ring of worlds I have been working into the dark past them, and worlds I could not see a week ago resolve at the new edge of it. I understand what it means the moment I have it. Bringing the mother and the newborn through, lifting the rock off the coal floor, steadying a colony that had braced against the clock for weeks, all of it bought me a wider sky to read. A group that has put a bad night behind it instead of teetering one away from the call is a group the system lets see further. I file it where every wind goes, and then I use the wider scan for the one thing it exists for, and I look. And at the new edge of the scan, out past the 3 worlds I already had in reach, a world resolves that the old range could never have shown me, and the read it gives me stops me the way the green world stopped me the first night. It is white, frozen end to end, locked under ice, the kind of world the rich groups in the chat would never glance at because there is nothing green on it to boast about, and the kind of world my colony needs more than any green one now. Water, locked in the ice in quantity past anything the green world pipes home, and the volatiles a growing colony burns through faster than a dead rock ever warned me it would. All of it sitting on a frozen world nobody owns at the new edge of a scan I could only reach because a child was born. I hang in the high cold view with the white world ahead of me and the eased coal behind me, and a 12th soul breathing in a walled room on the rock below, and I run the count the way I always run it, and this time it climbs. But a board that ticks upward is a board that draws eyes, and the chat is not the only thing reading it. A tier 0 world that climbs off the bottom of the coal list while it cannot grow its world is exactly the kind of anomaly a sharper eye than the channels notices and wants to understand. Attention is danger. It was danger on the night shift console, and it is danger on a board where the strong absorb the weak, and the armor that lifted us off the coal floor is the same thing that makes us worth a second look. I would rather be 3 worlds and growing when the second look comes than 1 rock and a curiosity, so I do not let the colony settle into the steadying for long. The wider scan has shown me where the next world is. The white one, water and volatiles for a colony that just added a mouth and will add 4 more before the season turns. And I point the whole operation at it. We move before the eyes that are starting to find us decide what we are, and Chaewon's hands are already on the craft that will carry us to the ice. Chaewon's hands are on the new craft before the colony has finished feeling proud of itself, and that is exactly how I want it, because a group that stands around admiring a single tick on the board is a group that has stopped reading the rest of the board. The ship she is shaping is built for the ice from the keel up, a colder and heavier craft than the Green World lander. She read the White World's nature off my scan the same morning I found it, the cold and the locked water and the brittle ground under the ice, and she is building for that and nothing else. The hull rising under her hands is squat and double-skinned, a sealed belly meant to carry water home and a crew through a cold the Green World never threatened us with. She tells me without looking up that the lander would have flown to the ice and frozen its drive solid on the first night down, and that the difference between this hole and that one is the difference between a claim and a tomb. I take her word, because she has never once been wrong about her own metal, and I go up to read the road instead of the ship. The White World hangs out at the new edge of the scan, the edge I could only reach because a child drew its first breath 2 nights ago. I take it apart again before I point my people at it, world by world the same as always, because the one thing worse than a hazard is a hazard I did not see coming. The read is plain in the parts that matter and wrong, in a way I cannot name yet in the parts that do not. Water locked in the ice end to end, and volatiles under it, the fuel and the cold stores in the breathing reserve all sitting frozen on a world nobody owns. The growing colony has a clock I only started reading after the birth, because 12 mouths draw down water and volatiles faster than 11 did, and 4 more births are coming across the season, and the green world's pipe is only 1 pipe. A second world feeding the home stores is the difference between a colony that grows and one that grows until it tips its own supply negative and starves at a fuller table than it ever set. I do not say that part to the group. What they hear is that we need water, and I point them at the ice. The cold is the wall, and I know it before the hull is half-skinned. My scan reads the white world's surface temperature low enough that a body in it without an answer lasts minutes, the drive parts seizing, the water in a person's own blood turning against them, and no wall Chewan builds and no air I drop solves a cold that deep on open ground. The green world tried to kill us with fauna and spores, things I could read and answer from above. A frozen world does not need fauna. It only needs the ground team to step out of the hull, and the cold does the rest, and I have no function in the whole lodestar that warms a planet. What I have is 2 women carrying who have been waiting for a world that asks for exactly what they hold, and the time has come to lean on the half of the group that chat has spent 5 parts calling dead weight. Na Ariam is the first of them, and I go to her the way I went to Bake Seol on the first morning and Chewon on the third, because the world ahead needs her aspect more than it needs anything I can drop. She is one of the 4 still carrying, earlier along than Bake Seol was, steady on her feet and clear-eyed, and she has said little across the parts because the rock never once asked for what she does. Her aspect, she tells me, is tempering, the power to take a body's heat and a place's heat and hold them where she sets them, push warmth into a cold she chooses, or pull it out of a heat that would kill. On Sereth that bought us nothing, because the rock's cold was a thing a heat source answered. Out on a world cold enough to seize a drive in minutes, it buys us the only thing that matters, a team that can stand on the ice long enough to do the work. I ask her the question that decides the part, whether she can hold a temper over a ground team in that cold, carrying without spending herself the way Bake Seol nearly spent herself for a thread of food. She does not boast and she does not flinch. What she tells me is that she can hold it over a few bodies in a tight ring, that the cost is real and she will feel it, and that she will warn me the moment she nears her floor instead of going past it, because she has a second life to think about and she is not stupid. That is the most useful answer anyone has given me since Nari told me the flying was the part she was sure of. Kudazum is the second, and she finds me before I have to go looking, which tells me she has been waiting for this world the way Yuna waited for the green one. She is further along than Ariam, heavy enough that she moves with a hand under the weight of her, and her aspect has sat as useless as mine on a rock with no water in it. Water finding, she tells me, the sense that reads where water lies in ground that hides it. How deep, how much, how clean, and on a frozen world every bit of it is water and the trouble is never whether it is there, but where the volatiles lie under the ice worth the digging. She can read that. Standing on the white surface, she can tell the ground team where the buried stores are richest and where the ice is only ice, so they cut once in the right place instead of a dozen times in the wrong ones. On a world that kills you by the minute, that is the difference between a loaded hull and a frozen crew. 2 women carrying, one to make the cold survivable, and one to find what we came for, and not a fighter between them. The green world was held by a wall. A frozen one will be taken by a held warmth in a dowsing sense, and I would not trade either woman for a settler group's whole green planet. I lay the run out for the group the night before we fly. Over a ration nobody has to count anymore. The green world stores deep enough now that a full plate is just a plate. They hear the plan plainly, because a planner who hides the cost from the people paying it has lost them before they board. The white world gives us water and volatiles enough to feed the colony past the births that are coming, and it asks one price, that a ground team steps out into a cold that wants them dead and trusts 2 women carrying to keep them alive in it. Ariam holds the temper. Dasim finds the stores. Chewon plants the beacon and cuts the ice where Dasim points. Nari flies. Yuna comes for the hands and the one wall the ice might still throw at us. Heyoon stays on the rock with Bake Seol and the newborn and the other 2 carrying, because the most load-bearing role on the board is the one that keeps the mothers, and I will not strip the home rock of its medic for a water run, and I sit above all of it and read the cold and the ice in the dark between, and feed it to them a beat before they need it. Ariam asks me flat, what happens if she nears her floor with the team still on the ice in the hull 100 steps off? I give her the honest read, that I pull them back the instant she calls it and we fly home with whatever we have, and come again, because no load of water is worth a body, hers least of all with 2 lives in it. She holds my eye a moment and tells me that is the right answer, and that she half expected the wrong one. I tell her she has been listening to the chat too long. Nari lifts us off Sereth into the dark. On a morning the uplink has crawled most of the way back, and the moment the gray rock falls away, I am back up in the scan in my head with my body bolted into a seat, which is the only place I have ever been any use. The white world hangs ahead, a short hop the way the system makes everything short, hours and not the years a true crossing would cost. The world's wound close enough around the dead star that I can point at one and reach it in a morning. I run the road up to Nari as she flies. The drift, the thin pull, the face of the frozen world turning toward us, and she threads the new hull down the line. I feed her with the steadiness that tells me Chaewon built this one right too. The white grows in the scan, a glare off locked ice sharpening into a world we are about to stand on, and the cold reads off it harder the closer we drop, a number that would be abstract if I had not promised 5 people I would not let it touch them. It is white end to end, and that is the second thing the scan gives me, the thing that goes into the drawer where I keep what does not add up. The first thing is the cold, plain, and answerable. Under it sits the surface itself, and it is wrong, and I cannot say why on the first read. Nari sets the hull down on a shelf of sound ice at the lip of a long, shallow basin, the double skin holding the drive warm against a cold that would have seized the green world lander solid. The second the belly settles, I open the team into the link and put Ariam's temper to work before a single boot touches the ice. Through the satellite net I feel her aspect catch, a ring of held warmth settling over the ground team inside the hull. Then I spend the uplink and do the thing the relay was built for, pushing my reach into her tempering the way I pushed it into Yuna's bulwark, over the green world, and the ring she holds widens and steadies past what she could carry alone. She feels it land. The shock of it runs through her in the link, because she had set herself to hold a thin warm ring against a killing cold, and felt the ring go deep and solid instead, and her bracing turns from holding off failure to pressing toward the claim. My ground crew steps out onto the ice inside Ariam's ring, and the cold breaks on the boosted temper instead of on them. I read it from above, the white surface stretching out under the ground team. The basin Dasim asks Nari to set down beside, and the read of the place sharpens now that I am low over it and holding still. A frozen world should carry its own weather written into the surface, the cracks of its own cold, the slow scour of its own ice. None of that is written here. Under the frost, the scan shows me a surface that was leveled, stripped flat and then frozen over, the way the ore moon red torn, and the green world's fungal floor grew over something the scan would not show me. On the ice below me, Dasim already has her hand flat to the surface though. The work started, and the wrongness goes in the drawer with the rest. Dasim finds the stores fast, which is the whole point of her, and she finds them the way Baexiol found a thread in dead dirt, by feel, blind, her hand flat to the frozen ground and her eyes shut against the glare. She tells me through the link where the volatiles lie richest under the basin floor, away from the open ice where the team would have cut on instinct, a seam off to the cold side where the gas is pooled and froze in quantity. Depth and cleanness she names too, before Chaewon has even ready to cut her. I run it against my scan from above, and the two reads line up, her sense from the ground and my read from orbit naming the same seam. That doubling is the first time 2 of my people have read the same hidden thing from 2 directions and agreed, and it is worth more than either read alone. I call the team to the seam Dasim marked. Chaewon kneels at it with the beacon and the cutter both, the claim to plant and the ice to open, and Yuna sets herself between the work and the open basin, out of the habit of a wall, even on a world that has thrown nothing at us yet. The world throws something anyway, and it is the cold, the way the green world's real weapon was the spores rising off the floor, and not the fauna at the front. Ariam's voice comes through the link tight, telling me the ring is costing her faster than she read it would, that the cold here is not a steady cold but a thing that leans harder in pulses, sweeping down off the basin's high side in waves that press her temper toward its floor each time they come. I read it the instant she names it, the scan catching the pulses she is feeling, a cold front moving across the basin in slow heavy sweeps. The trap reads the way the spores read over the green world, the planet itself going against us the longer we stand on it, the cold deepening on a clock, while the team is still cutting. Ariam is carrying. She will hold the ring past her own floor before she lets the cold reach the team, because that is the kind of woman the system put in my group, and the kind I will not let spend herself the way the old console once let a voice in my ear spend everything trusting me. So I find her in the net and weigh the uplink. The move the run turns on, and I keep the boost on her temper full even as the meter drops, because a ring that fails is a team that freezes, and the water means nothing to a frozen crew. Holding the boost on Ariam means I am not holding it anywhere else, and the cost is the cost. I carry it on her. The cutting is slow, because Chaewon has to plant the beacon and open the seam both, and the cold pulses lean harder each pass, and Ariam's voice in the link goes from tight to thin. Her voice names her floor, the way she promised it would, near it but not past it, the cold front pressing her temper down faster than I am refilling her through the relay. The seam not yet open, the beacon not yet planted. This is the call I told her I would make, the one where I pull the team and we fly home with nothing and come again. I have my mouth half open to make it when the scan reads the cold front's next sweep building off the high side, heavier than the last, the one that takes Ariam past her floor whether I pull the team or not. A retreat to the hole is 100 steps across open ice, and that sweep reaches the team before they reach the door. Pulling them back does not save them from this one. I have a team in the open, a builder mid-cut, a temper holder nearing empty, and a wave of killing cold building that beats them all to shelter. The old helplessness comes up in me the way it always does. The dispatcher who can see the thing coming and cannot put his body between it and the people, and I do not let it land, because I have a function I have not spent, and a floor I have not yet hit. So I reach into the Lodestar Pass scan, drop, launch, and relay into the part of the system I have not opened, and I find what the run has been building toward without naming it. It is not a new function. What waits there is the drop, the one I have leaned on since the first night, opened wider, and the read of it unrolls the moment I touch it. Until now, a drop came down where I aimed it and landed near, close enough on open ground. A cache settled into the dirt a few steps off. On a world where a few steps is 100 and the cold reaches the team before the team reaches the cache, near is not good enough, and the system has just handed me the answer. The precision to land a drop not near the team, but on the team. A cache set down exactly where they stand. I do not stop to marvel at it, because the cold front is building and Arium is at her floor and the seam is not open. The uplink goes out of me into a drop, scrubber stock, sealed warm reserve, and a heat core Chaewon can crack in a breath. I aim it not at the hull and not near the team, but at the marked seam, at the exact ground where Chaewon kneels and Arium holds and Yuna walls, and it comes down out of the dark and lands among them in the second before the cold sweep reaches them. The heat core cracks open over the ground team and pushes a pocket of warmth up under Arium's failing ring, and the cold front's heavy sweep breaks on the two of them together, her temper in the dropped heat, instead of on her temper alone going past its floor. She feels the floor go out from under her feet and hold. I hear it in the link. The woman who was a breath from spending herself past the line of safety, with a second life in her, catching the dropped heat and steadying on it, the ring holding through the sweep that should have ended the run. The precision drop landed where no drop of mine ever could have landed before, on the team and not near them, and it bought Arium the margin to hold the last of the cutting. Chaewon, in the pocket of held warmth, opens the seam and plants the beacon both, her hands moving fast now that the cold is off her back. She plants it, and the beacon goes into the frozen crust of the white world, and the moment it takes the scan changes the label on the world under me, the empty tag falling off it, claim settling into its place. The volatiles in the water register home at once. The seam Daesum found and Chaewon opened piping the white world stores back across the dark to Sereth. A frozen planet's worth of the fuel in the cold reserve in the water a growing colony burns through. All of it flowing to the rock the chat keeps calling the dead world. I sit up above the basin and let the wind land full. 2 worlds feeding the home rock now, the green one and the white one. A tier 0 rock with stores rising on 2 pipes instead of 1. The cold front sweeps across a basin that belongs to my group, and finds a team already pulling back to the hole inside Arium's steadied ring. The work done. A reward lands while the team is still crossing the ice to the hull, and I half know what it will say before I read it, because nothing the Lodestar gives me comes free. All of it a wage that lands when the work is done. The drop precision is mine now, settled for true the way the functions settle. A cache I can land exactly where my people stand instead of near them. The upgrade that just kept a temper holder and a builder and a wall alive on a world that kills by the minute. I said it with the other wins. The whole team is back inside the double skin before Arium lets her ring down by degrees, and she sits heavy, spent, and whole, both her lives through the cold, and Daesum beside her with the reed of the seam still in her hand, and I do the count from the orbital view, and the count climbs. But the white world is not done with me, because the wrongness I filed on the first read is still sitting in the drawer. As Nari powers the hull to lift, Seojiwo's voice reaches me through the link from back on Sereth, where she has been carrying, quiet, and without a single world that asks for what she holds. She tells me she felt something off the white world's read, even from the home rock, faint, through the link I opened over the basin. Before we leave, she asks me to hold the scan on the surface a moment, because her aspect is reading a thing my scan is reading too, and neither of us can name it alone. Her aspect is farsight, the sense that reads a place's history off its ground, what happened on it and to it, and on a frozen world she has never touched she is reading it secondhand through my satellite net. Faint, wrong, and insistent. I hold the scan on the basin. She reads the history through my eyes from a planet away, and I read the surface from orbit, and the two of us together land on the same thing the way Daesum and I landed on the seam, her history sense and my scan naming one truth from 2 directions. The white world was not always white. Jiwoo reads it off the ground through the link, a surface that held something once, leveled, stripped, and only then frozen over. My scan confirms the shape of what she feels, a basin flattened by something and left for the cold to claim. The frost a shroud over a thing that was taken, rather than a thing that grew. The ore moon red torn. That green jungle world grew its fungus over something the scan would not show me. And now the ice world reads stripped and scoured under its frost. And Jiwoo, reading 3 worlds worth of secondhand history off my net in a single quiet breath, tells me the thing that puts the cold in my chest that has nothing to do with the white world's surface. It is not just this world. Every empty world the scan finds reads the same way under its different skins. Scoured clean and left barren, emptied and not born empty. And the difference between an empty world and a robbed one is the whole question I have been refusing to ask. Something emptied them. I file it, the way I filed the Cedar class tag, setting the scoured worlds in the drawer where I keep what does not add up. 3 wrong things now where there were 2. The torn moon and the unreadable aspect, and a cluster of empty worlds that were emptied by a hand I cannot see. Jiwoo, reading my silence through the link, asks me whether the thing that scoured them is gone. I tell her plainly that I do not know, and that not knowing is exactly why I am filing it and not chasing it. Because a colony with 12 souls and a newborn does not go hunting the thing that strips worlds bare. We take our water and we climb the board, and we keep the people alive, and we learn what scoured the cluster when knowing it changes what I do next. She promises to keep reading every world we claim, secondhand off the net, because a thing that emptied a cluster is a thing she would rather see coming than meet. I tell her that is the most useful thing anyone has said to me all day, because a scout who reads the past off the ground is exactly the eye a colony built on claiming empty worlds did not know it needed. Nari lifts us off the ice and threads the loaded hull home across the short dark, the white world stores already piping into the Lodestar net behind us. I watch the home rock's figure climb the whole flight back the way I watched it climb off the green world. Water and volatiles registering home. The colony's reserve deepening on a second pipe. When we set down on Sereth, the rock has changed again, the way it changed after the green world. The drums of water sitting deeper, the cold stores and the volatiles filling the reserve, a growing colony will burn through across the berths to come. The home stores reading further from the floor than they have since the seeding. Bake Seol is up and on the ground again, her green hand back in the dirt now that the dirt gives back. The newborn guarded at the center of a colony that has a center now. Hoon has kept the rock steady while we were gone, the other 2 carrying well, the home holding. 2 worlds claimed and feeding, a 3rd in reach, a temper holder and a water finder proven, a precision drop in my hand, and a scout watching the past off the net. I do the count, and the count climbs, and the colony eats that night without anyone weighing a bite. The board climbs with it, and a board that climbs draws eyes, and I have known that since the night the birth lifted us off the coal floor. Up over our heads, the chat is still doing what it has done 5 parts running. The handle I have learned to recognize cracking that the dead world's glitch has glitched again. Certain a tier 0 rock cannot be climbing on anything real. But the chat is not the only thing reading the board, and a group that grows its numbers and its worlds both while it cannot grow its development the way the rich do, is exactly the anomaly a sharper eye notices and wants to understand. I felt that eye start to find us the night of the birth, and tonight, with a second claimed world feeding the rock and the figure climbing fast enough that even the channel cannot keep calling it a glitch, the eye finds its voice. A ping reaches me that is not the system and not the open chat, a line opening straight to my group across the cluster. A commander somewhere out on a world I have never seen reaching past the channel to speak to the rock group directly. I sit up above the rock and read the request come in, and I know the quiet stretch where nobody worth fearing was watching has just ended. The line comes in, and I take it the way I once took an unscheduled call on the night console, which is to say I do nothing fast, and I let the other man go first. Hwang Mire has the request in her hands before I do, because the link this stranger is reaching across is hers as much as the Lodestar's. Her signal aspect, the thing that sharpens and carries a contact between groups, that the system would otherwise let fade to static. She is the one who told me a part ago that her power did nothing for a group alone on a rock with no one to talk to, and tonight the rock has someone trying to talk to it at last. Reading the incoming line, she tells me what her aspect feels off it, before a single word is crossed, that the contact is steady, deliberate, and strong, built and held by someone who knows how to hold a channel open across the dark, which is a thing no group I have met on the chat has bothered to learn. I tell her to put it through, and to stay in the link while it runs, because I want her reading the man the whole time he is reading me. The voice that comes across is warm, and the warmth is the first thing I file. He opens by naming us with a plain warm pleasure, calling us the climbers, the group nobody on the board can stop watching, setting aside the dead world and the nursery the chat has worn out. Then he greets me by my own name, Yoon Hae Jin, the man running the Tier 0 rock, telling me that watching it claim a green world and then a white one has filled him with a kind of admiration he does not bother to hide. His name, he says, is Du Guillaume, and he gives it the weight of a name he expects to be known already. The board behind my eyes tells me why in the same breath, because the handle he is speaking from sits at the very top of it, the richest world the seeding handed out, a group that woke with everything mine woke without. This is the top of the board reaching down to the bottom of it, except the bottom is climbing, and that is the whole reason he is here. I answer him the way the console taught me to answer a voice I do not yet know the shape of. Polite, unhurried, giving him my attention and nothing under it. My reply is that the climb has cost more than the board shows, and that I am glad of a quiet word with someone who reads the board instead of laughing at it, which is true and also tells him nothing, and I let the silence after it do the work silences do. He fills it the way I want him to, because someone who reaches across a cluster to talk has come to say a thing, and the surest way to learn it is to let him arrive at it himself. The first while of it he spends being generous, telling me the green world groups in the chat are fools who will dig their one planet until it is a husk, and never understand why a rock outgrew them. Then he tells me he worked out what my aspect does before the system would tell him, that I see the empty worlds the rich cannot, and that this makes me the single most interesting group in the cluster, and the single most exposed. That last word is the one he wants me to catch, and I catch it and do not let him see me catch it. Exposed. He lays it out gently, doing me the favor of a truth my position keeps me from seeing, that a group climbing fast on numbers and claimed worlds, while it cannot grow its development the way the strong do, is a group every sharper eye on the board is now noticed, and that noticing, once worlds connect, becomes appetite. His own appetite he never names. Theirs is the one he lays out. The other strong groups, the raiders the convergence will wake, the predators a fat slow climber draws. All the while he is warning me about a danger, and standing carefully outside the frame of it, the friend pointing at the storm. And I have read enough men talk their way toward a thing to know the friend pointing at the storm is very often the storm himself. So I ask him the question that keeps him talking and costs me nothing, which is what the convergence is. Because he has said the word twice now as a thing I should fear, and I would rather he explained it than left it as a shadow. He is pleased to. This is the part of the call he came to give, the part where he knows a thing I do not and gets to hand it to me. And the handing of knowledge tells me more than the knowledge does. The worlds are wound close around the dead star, he tells me. Closer every week as the system draws them in. There is a point coming when the small worlds draw near enough that a group reaches its neighbors on foot. Every island fused into a single connected board. An orbital hub where every developed group meets every other in the flesh for the first time since the seeding. He calls it the orrery, and he says the name the way Chaewon says a load-bearing weld, the thing the whole structure hangs on. When the worlds connect, the chat ceases to be the only contact between groups. The strong reach the weak with more than words, and a cedar climbing on claimed worlds and a high count of coming children, he tells me, gentle as anything, is going to be the most valuable thing in that hub, and the least able to hold it alone. I file every word of it under the warmth, because the warmth is the wrapping, and the convergence is the gift, and the gift is a map of exactly when my group becomes reachable by force. He has just told me the clock I did not know I was running, and he has been counting toward that day the way I count toward a birth. Mireille's reading runs under his voice the whole time, and she feeds it to me through the link in pieces. He is not lying. The convergence is real and the warmth is real too, sincere and a tool at once, and under both of them the channel he is holding is doing something her signal aspect can feel and mine cannot. Reaching past the words toward the link itself, testing the shape of how my group is joined. I tell her to hold our side of the link tight and give him nothing of how it is built, and she tells me she already is, and that he is good, and that good is the part that worries her. Then he makes the offer, and he makes it the way a generous man makes a gift he has decided you need. He tells me a cedar is a rare and precious thing, and a fragile one, that the cluster is about to become a dangerous place for the rare and the precious and the fragile, and that he is in a position to keep mine safe. His group is the strongest on the board. When the worlds connect, his world will be a fortress the raiders break on, and he would extend that protection to mine, fold the rock group under his banner, link our holdings so that an attack on my claimed worlds is an attack on his. In return, he asks only that my cedar reach, my side of the empty worlds, point where his group can grow into them too. An alliance, he calls it, a partnership of the sight that finds the empty worlds and the strength that holds them. He says it warmly, and he says it well. And it is, on the surface of it, the most reasonable thing anyone in the cluster has ever offered the dead world. I read the bind under it before he has finished saying it, because the shape of an offer is in what it leaves out, and what this one leaves out is any way for it to ever end. Fold under his banner. Link our holdings so his strength covers mine, which means his strength sits over mine. Point my cedar reach where his group grows, which means my sight becomes his engine, and the worlds I claim become his territory by the same pipe that was supposed to protect them. There is no clause in any of it where my group walks back out whole. No day the partnership matures into two groups standing apart, only an alliance that ends with the smaller group inside the larger one, and no seam left where they joined. Where my lodestar links my people and lifts them, leaving each of them more themselves inside the net. His aspect does the other thing, the thing Mireille has been feeling all along under his held channel. It binds. A thing bound to him grows him and shrinks itself, and the protection is the cage, and the cage is the point. I do not say any of that. Instead, I decline the way a dispatcher declines a thing he cannot refuse outright, which is to say I do not decline at all. I delay. I defer. I make the no out of agreement and time. He is right, I tell him, that the cluster is about to get dangerous, and right that a seer cannot hold alone, and I am grateful past saying to have heard it from a commander who understands the board. An alliance with the strongest group on the board, I go on, is a thing no commander in my position could turn aside lightly, and I will not turn it aside lightly. Then I ask for time the way the consul taught me, on the grounds that make refusal sound like haste. A thing this large deserves to be brought to my whole group rather than decided over a single line by one man, My people earned a voice in it by surviving for it, and I will not be the commander who signs his group's future away between one drop and the next. Every word of it is true and not one of it is a yes, and someone who reaches for the precious thing gently cannot grab at it the moment it asks for time without showing the hand he has been hiding in the warmth. He gives me the time because he has to, and in the giving he tells me one more thing he did not mean to. There is no rush, he says. The convergence is weeks off yet, and the offer stands until the worlds connect, said lightly, a generous man waving away a small delay. What I hear under it is the deadline. The offer stands until the orrery, and at the orrery the chat-only distance ends, and protection that lasts until the exact moment he can take me without my consent is just his way of telling me when the velvet comes off the cage. He has handed me his own clock twice now, once as a warning and once as a courtesy, and both times it reads the same, that I am safe to refuse him only as long as the worlds stay apart, and that the worlds will not stay apart. I thank him for his patience as warmly as he offered his protection, and I mean the warmth exactly as much as he meant his, which is to say I mean it as a tool. Over our heads while the line runs, the chat is doing the thing it does, and I catch it through Myray because she is faster on it than I am, the cluster watching the top of the board open a private channel to the bottom of it, and not knowing what to make of the sight. The handle I have learned to recognize, the one that has called us a glitch for 5 parts, starts the night certain Du Geom is reaching down to a dead group for sport. Then the line holds, and a commander does not spend that long on sport, and the read in the chat turns the way a board turns when its certainty cracks under it. Mireille tells me the handles who spent 5 parts certain are asking each other why the strongest group in the cluster would court the weakest. A few of the sharper ones land on the only answer that fits, that the rock group must be worth courting, which is a sentence none of them has ever had cause to type before. The same eye that read our climb as a joke is starting to read it as a prize, and a prize is a more dangerous thing to be on this board. I let none of that into my voice for Do Guillaume, who can read the chat as well as I can and would clock the moment I started caring what it said. The call stays exactly where I built it, a grateful climber honored by a great man's notice, taking his wisdom to heart and his offer under advisement, buying the weeks he just told me I have. Before he lets the line go, he does one last thing, and it is the most useful thing he gives me all night, because he cannot resist it. He tells me, friend to friend, that he hopes I will not waste the weeks claiming more worlds than I can hold, that expansion without protection only fattens a group for the convergence, and that the wisest thing a seeder could do at the time before the orrery is consolidate under a strong hand, rather than spread thinner. All of it he means as counsel. What it tells me is that my spreading is the exact thing he wants stopped, that a seeder scattered across many worlds is a seeder he cannot fold in one grab, and that the advice a predator gives you is a map of the thing he fears you doing. I thank him for it. Then I file it in the drawer with the rest, where the Cedar class tag and the scoured worlds already sit. One more wrong thing that points somewhere I cannot yet see, and I let the line go. Miri lets our side of the link down by degrees the way Yuna let down the wall over the green world. Slow, watching the channel close clean rather than snapping it and leaving a scene he could read. She is quiet a moment after, the way she is quiet when her aspect has shown her something she is still turning over. And then she tells me the things she felt that she could not say while he was listening. The whole call, under the warmth and the convergence in the offer, his held channel was mapping how my group is joined, reading the Lodestar net the way her signal reads a contact, learning the shape of the thing he means to bind. He did not get it, she tells me, because she held our side closed against exactly that, but he got the edges of it, enough to know the net is real, strong, and worth wanting, and that is why he courted instead of grabbing, because a thing you cannot yet take you keep warm, until you can. I tell her she just earned the most load-bearing read anyone has given me since the green world, because a man's aspect reaching for the shape of mine is a thing I would have walked into blind without the one woman in my group, whose power is built to feel it. And the moment I say it, the Lodestar pays out, on its own grudging schedule, the instant I prove I will spend the tool. The function settles while Mariah is still bringing the link down. And what answers is the relay itself, the link and lift I unlocked holding the green world, opening wider under my hands the way the scan opened wider after the birth. I hold it open and let the read of it unroll. Until tonight, the relay linked my people across a claim and let me lift one aspect at a time through the net, a thread to each of them and a boost I could carry to one, holding my own across a parlay against a commander whose whole aspect reached for the shape of my net, giving him nothing while Mireille read everything. The system marks the held line the way it marks a survived danger. The relay widens from a set of threads into a single net, a thing I can hold across more distance and more worlds at once. Every aspect in the group joined in it together instead of one at a time. I note it and move on the way every wind goes, and I do not miss the joke in it, that the function that turns 10 women and a rock into one network got wider the night the strongest group in the cluster came to map it. The call gets laid out for the group that night, over a ration nobody counts, because a parlay that decides the group's future is not a thing I get to keep behind my teeth like the wrong things in the drawer. They hear plainly who reached us, The top of the board, the richest world, the seating handed out. And what he offered, protection and alliance. And what the offer was under the warmth. A banner we fold under and a net he folds in. I do not soften the danger and I do not inflate it. Yuna, who reads a threat the flat way she reads everything, asks me whether we can hold against him when the worlds connect, and I give her the truth, that I do not know yet, that he is stronger by every figure on the board and that strength is the lone thing no space chest will ever hand me. Chaewon asks the better question, which is how long, and I give her the weeks he gave me, the convergence, the clock under all of it now. Miri tells the group the part only she could feel, that his warmth was real and a weapon both, and that a commander who can mean a thing and wield it in the same breath is the most dangerous kind there is. The group takes that the way it takes everything she says, because the quiet one whose aspect reads the link does not waste a word. Hyun, who has said little, asks the question that is hers to ask, whether folding under his protection would be safer for the mothers and the children than standing alone against the convergence, because that is the weight she carries and she will not pretend she does not feel it pull. I do not wave it off because it is the realest question in the room and the exact lever Jian built his offer to pull. What I give her is the bind under the protection. A group folded into his is a group whose children grow as his numbers and not their own, whose mothers are safe the way a held thing is safe, kept because they are worth keeping and let go the moment they are not. The safety he offers ends the day it costs him more than it gains, which is the day a cull comes for someone and a bound group is the cheapest thing to spend. I would rather be free and at risk than safe and owned, I tell her, but I will not pretend the risk is hers to carry lightly, because it is her hands the births come through, and her reading that keeps the mothers, and if I am wrong about him, the cost lands on her first. She holds my eye the way Ariam held it over the ice, and tells me she would rather be free too, and that she wanted to hear me say the cost out loud before she agreed, and that I did. I tell her that is the most useful thing anyone has said to me all night, and I am starting to think the whole group has learned to talk to me in the one currency I trust, which is the cost named plainly with the fear left in it. So we do not fold, and the not folding is its own kind of decision, the one the whole night turned on. I will not sign the group under Du Guillaume's banner, and I will not insult him by saying so, and the space between those two is the weeks he gave me. Those weeks go to the exact thing he counseled me against, spreading, claiming, scattering the group across worlds no single grab can fold. Because a cedar he cannot take in one motion is a cedar he has to come for the hard way, and the hard way costs even the strongest group on the board. I go back up over the rock after the group sleeps, the green world and the white one piping home, the wider relay holding the whole group in one net now, the convergence ticking somewhere out in the dark toward the day the distance ends. The quiet stretch did not just end tonight, it acquired a deadline. But under the deadline sits the thing I cannot stop turning over, and it is not Do Guillaume. He is a danger I can read, a commander with a strong aspect and a clock, the kind of threat the console trained me to weigh and answer. The thing in the drawer is worse, because I cannot weigh it. Du Guillaume wants my net because he can see it is valuable, and I do not yet know what makes it valuable, and fighting for a thing I do not understand against men who do, puts me one step from the ground. Before the worlds connect and Do Guillaume files the rock group as a target he will come collect, I need to understand what a cedar is, why the system sorted us differently and called us precious in the same breath it called us useless. That answer has only ever come from one place, the worlds themselves. My scan has been holding one for me since before the ice, a world I flagged and filed away, never gone to, because the white one fed the colony and this one feeds nothing. It reads dead but dead the wrong way, the way the ore moon read torn and the white world read scoured, except worse, because something stripped this one bare and then buried it over. A ruined world. The kind of place Seo Jiwo's Farsight was made to read. The scout who reads a place's history off its ground, who promised me a part ago she would rather see the thing that empties worlds coming than meet it. White ice taught me the empty worlds were emptied. The bone world will tell me by what, and I would rather know before the convergence than after. So I point the fleet at the ruin, and Jiwoo readies her aspect for the first world we have ever gone to, chasing nothing but the truth, with no water and no ore to bring home. And Nari sets our course for the bones. Nari brings the fleet down on the ruin world the way she brings down everything. Clean, and the wrongness of the place reaches me before the hull has even settled, because the scan was already feeding me a surface I could not read all the way down on the approach. The ore moon read torn. That green world grew its fungus over a thing the scan would not show me, and the white world read leveled under its frost. This one wears its history on the outside where any eye can see it, and that is the first thing that puts the cold in my chest, because the dead worlds I have claimed so far hid what was done to them, and this one does not bother. We come in low over a plane that is not a plane. It is a field of standing shapes, structures the scan refuses to name, run end to end across a whole hemisphere, and threaded through them and under them and built into them, the long pale curves of something that was not a structure at all. Bone. A world skinned over in the leavings of a thing that grew here once, built here, lived here, and was taken off the surface entire, and I take it from the orbital view with my body bolted into the seat, and the thing it makes me feel has no word. I sit a moment before I open the team into the link, because a planner who walks his people out into a thing he cannot name is a planner who has stopped reading the board. We have never come to a world for this. Every claim before this one paid back the uplink it cost in something a colony can eat or drink or build with, and this world feeds nothing. No water worth the pipe, no air a person breathes without a scrubber, no ore the moon did not already give us cheaper. I came back to it for the one thing it has that no green world holds, which is an answer, and I do not yet know what the answer costs to read. COG Woe is the reason we are here, and I go to her in the crew space before the skin opens. Because the world ahead asks for what she holds the way the ice asked for Arium and the green world asked for Yuna. She is one of the three still carrying, the quiet one whose aspect sat as useless as mine across 5 parts of worlds that wanted water, metal, and a wall. And tonight the colony has finally gone to a world that wants exactly what she does. Her aspect is farsight, the sense that reads a place's history off its ground, what happened on it and to it. And on the white world she read 3 worlds worth of scoured history secondhand through my net from a planet away, and told me the empty worlds were emptied. Now I have set her down on top of the worst of them. I ask her the question that decides the part, whether she can read a world like this from the surface of it, carrying, without the reading spending her the way the cold nearly spent REM. She does not boast, and she does not flinch. What she tells me is that a world this loud will not need coaxing, that the trouble here is not reaching the history but holding it off, because a place that screams its own end at her is a place she has to read in measured doses or it reads her instead. She will go slow, and warn me the moment it leans too hard. I tell her that is the most useful answer anyone has given me since Arium told me she would call her floor before she crossed it, and I open the team into the net. The ground crew steps out onto the surface of the ruin world, and the scan sharpens the instant they are low and still, the way it always sharpens once I am holding over a thing rather than passing across it. Jiwoo walks out among the standing shapes, with Yuna a step behind her out of the old habit of a wall, though nothing on this world moves, and nothing on it lives. And Chaewon comes after with the claim beacon in her hands, because the plan is the plan even on a world that feeds us nothing. We claim it. A beacon in the crust pipes a world's resources home, and this world's resource is the truth. So we plant the beacon to hold the world long enough to read it, and Chaewon kneels among the bones to do the work she has done on 4 worlds now. While she readies it, I hold over the field and let the deep red run, and the structures the scan would not name on the approach begin to resolve under my eyes into a thing I can almost read. And what they resolve into is a city, not a ruin in the way a wreck is a ruin, not a thing that fell and was left. A built place, raised across a hemisphere by hands that knew what they were doing, roads between the standing shapes, the long careful order of a people who lived here for a long time and grew, and over all of it, through all of it, the bones. Jiwoo sets her hand to the ground and the history comes up into her, and I feel the first of it bleed through the link before she has a word for it. She goes still the way she warned me she would, taking it in the measured doses she promised, and the dose that reaches me secondhand through the net is enough to tell me she was right to be afraid of the loud worlds. This place does not give up its past the way the white world gave up its scoured basin, faint and insistent through a planet of distance. The bone world is right under her palm, and it is screaming. She tells me, low and careful, that the world held a people, not fauna, not the pale patient things the green world threw at us, but people, who built the city she is kneeling in and lived in it across a span she cannot count the end of. Generations of them, a whole civilization grown out of this ground the way Bake Seal coaxed a thread out of Sereth, except this thread became a world. They developed. That is the word that comes up out of her and lands cold in me, because it is the system's word, the one in the warning the flat voice gave me the first morning. Develop your world or be drawn down. A dead people who developed a whole world and then became the bones on top of it is a sentence I do not like the shape of. I keep the deep red running while she reads, because the two of us together land on a truth the way Dasim and I landed on the seam under the ice. Her history sends from the ground, and my scan from orbit naming one thing from 2 directions. The scan gives me the shape of the city's growth written into the crust, a record of a planet's development I have never had cause to read before. Settlements thickening into towns thickening into the hemisphere-spanning order under me. A tier climbing the way my own board climbs. World development laid out in the stone across the span Jiwoo cannot count. And then the scan gives me the other thing, the thing that turns the cold in my chest into something worse, because the record does not trail off. The way a thing left to ruin trails off. It ends. The development climbs to a height my own colony is nowhere near, and then across the whole hemisphere at once. In a single layer, the scan reads as one event rather than a slow fall. The city stops, and above that layer there is nothing but the bones. These people did not decline or wore themselves down or starve. A people who grew a world to its full height were taken off the surface of it all at once, and everywhere the city they built left standing empty over the leavings of them. While the field gives up its dead, the home rock gives up a life, and the two reach me in the same stretch of the night, because the orbital view holds the whole board at once and I have never had the luxury of reading one thread at a time. Min Haeun's voice comes through the link from back on Sereth, low and steady, telling me it has started. Na Ariam is at her term, the second of the 5 to come to it, far enough along since the ice that I have been counting toward this night the way I count toward everything, and her labor has begun on the home rock while the scout team reads the bones a cluster away. I take it the way I took the first one, by deciding fast what only I can do and getting out of the way of the hands that do the rest. Hayun runs the berth, the way she ran Baek Seul's, her mending reading the body and watching for the turn across the hours it takes. And she has done one of these here now and the rock will hold for the second the way it held for the first. What she needs from me is what she needed before, the things a medic needs that a dead rock cannot grow. And I weigh the uplink against the world I am holding and the cash I will have to drop home, and I spend it. This I could not have done before the white world, and I feel the difference in it the moment I aim the drop. I spend the uplink on a cache for Hoyun, clean water held warm, sealed cloth, a clamp and a blade, scrubber reserved to steady the walled room Chaewon built 2 parts ago. None of it lands near the rock at large, all of it on the cleared ground beside the shelter where Hoen's hands are. The precision drop the ice world bought me, setting the cache down exactly where she stands instead of 100 steps off across the cold. The cache comes down out of the dark onto Sereth, while I am holding over a world of bones a cluster away, steam curling off its skin, and the women carry it into her, and Hoen has warm, clean water for the second berth the home rock has ever held. I keep the read on the room the whole time the way I kept it through the first. The cold's lean, the air, the cold the dead star drops once the rock turns its face away. Both threads stay in my hands at once, the bones under one and the berth under the other, and I do not let either drop. The history keeps coming up into Jiwo, and the dose she lets through to me darkens the deeper she reads, because a world does not scream its end without screaming how the end came too. Her read is that the people of the city knew. Late, near the height of it, after the long generations of growing, a thing came into their sky that they could not answer, and the last of the history she reads off the ground is the fear of a people who understood, all at once and far too late, what their whole world had been grown for. They farmed and raised their numbers and climbed their development to the full height of what the ground would carry. And at that height the thing came down out of the dark and took the harvest. That is the word that comes up out of her into me. The word comes to her straight off the ground, the one the people themselves landed on in their last understanding. And she only repeats what they left in the stone. Harvest. A civilization that did not fall, a crop that ripened, and the ripening was the point. The long generations of growing the world with a season, and the thing in the sky was the reaper come at the end of it to take everything the season had grown. I sit in the orbital view with that landing in me, and the scans record laid out under it, the development climbing and climbing to a height, and then cut off clean in a single layer. And the shape of the whole thing comes together in me the way a board comes together when the last figure drops into place. Since the Ore Moon I have been filing wrong things in a drawer. The Cedar class tag the board cannot read. The empty worlds emptied by a hand I could not see. A rival commander courting the one thing his settled wealth cannot do, and not one of them made sense alone. They make sense together now, and the sense of them is the worst thing I have read off any board since the lights went out on Earth. The empty worlds are empty because they were harvested. Every scoured surface the scan finds, the torn moon and the leveled ice and the hemisphere of bones under me, is a world that was grown to its ripe height and then reaped, a crop taken off the field and the field left bare for the next. And the worst of it, the thing that puts the cold all the way through me, is that the field is being sown again. The seeding pulled 8.2 billion of us off Earth and cut us into groups, and dropped each group onto a world and told us in a flat voice to develop or be drawn down. And develop or be drawn down is not a warning a system gives to people it means to keep. It is the instruction a farmer gives the crop. Grow or be culled early. Fatten the world, climb the board, raise your numbers, and the higher you climb, the riper you grow. And the drawdown that I read for 5 parts as a slow hazard leaning on the weakest worlds is the reaper walking the field, taking the ripe ones first, and the thin ones after. My group and every group in the chat, we are not survivors at all. We are a planting. The whole cluster is a field that something emptied once, and the seeding is the next season, and every group boasting in the chat about the green world it woke on is a stalk bragging about how well it is growing toward the blade. I do not say any of that into the link, because Jiwoo is carrying and reading a world that is screaming and does not need her commander's chest cracking open over her while she holds the worst history in the cluster off her own mind by sheer care. What I tell her is that she has read the thing I came here to read, that she can let the dose down now, that she has given me more than the ice world and the green one together. She lets it down by degrees the way she promised, the history easing out of her, quiet the way she is quiet when her aspect has shown her something she is still turning over. Then she asks me the question that is hers to ask, whether the thing that took the people of the city is gone. I give her the same honest read I gave her over the ice, that I do not know, and that not knowing is exactly why I am filing it. and not chasing it. She reads my silence through the link, the way she reads everything, and she tells me she thinks I am lying to her, gently, that I worked out more standing over the bones than I am saying, and that she would rather carry the whole weight than half of it. I give her the part I am sure of, and hold back the part I am not, which is what a cedar is for in a field, because I do not know it yet, and a guess at that one is a guess I cannot afford to plant in her. The home rock answers the bones while I am still holding the weight of them, because the night that took the truth off a dead world gives a living thing back in the same breath. Hyun's voice comes through the link from Sereth, steadier than I have heard her since the first birth, telling me the mother is whole and the child is whole, and both of them are breathing the green world's thick air on a rock that the chat still calls dead. Na Ariam is through it, the woman who held a warm ring over a ground team on a world cold enough to seize a drive, spent on the ice and whole after it, spent again tonight on the harder work, and whole again, the child on her chest. I hear the first sound the new person makes come thin through the link, furious and alive, the most ordinary sound our species has ever made, and the second time it has ever been made on Sereth, and I sit in my own skull a cluster away with a world of bones under me, and let it land. The board ticks the instant the child draws its first breath, the way it ticked for baked seals, and I am watching it when it does. 12 becomes 13. On a board that sorts every group by world and by numbers both, the colony lifts another notch off the floor of the cull in the same hour I learned what the floor of the cull is for. The joke of the timing is not lost on me, that I read the Reaper's whole field standing over the dead and answered it the only way a cedar can, with one more life that was not there an hour ago. My lodestar settles the reading into a function once I have paid out for it, the line opening in the corner of my sight while Jiwoo is still letting the last of the history down out of her hand. This time it is the scan itself that answers, opening into a thing it could not do before, and the read of it unrolls while I hold it. Reading the bone world, holding the deep red on the city's record while Jiwoo read its history off the stone, the system marks the held line the way it marks every survived danger, and the scan opens into the past. A deep mode, the sight to read a world's whole past as well as its present, the arc of its development written into the crust, the climb and the height and the cutoff layer where a crop was taken. I store it with the rest of the winds, and I do not miss the bitter joke in it. The function that lets me read the reaping of worlds woke the night I first understood the worlds were a harvest. The system handing me the eyes to see the field the same hour it let me see what the field is for. I lay the reading out for the group that night, on Sereth and across the link both. Over a ration nobody counts, because a truth this size is not a thing I get to keep behind my teeth like the half-guesses in the drawer. They hear it plainly, that the empty worlds were grown full and then reaped, that a people built a whole world on the bone world and were taken off it entire, and that the seeding is the next planting in a field something is harvested before. I do not soften it, and I leave the dread in it. Yuna, who reads a threat the flat way she reads everything, asks me whether the thing that did the reaping is coming for us. I tell her the truth, that I do not know when, that the bones are old, but that the drawdown is the same blade walking the same field, and it has been leaning on us since the first morning. Chaewon asks the better question, which is what it changes. I give her the answer I caught off the record, that climbing the board the way the strong climb only looks like safety, because the ripest worlds are the ones the blade takes first. Myra is quiet a long moment. Then she tells the group the thing only she would land on, that this is why Du Guillaume courts a cedar ahead of a settler, that the strongest group on the board is the ripest stalk in the field, and some part of him knows it. Hyun, who has said little, the new child settled, and the mother resting and her hands free at last, asks the question that is hers to ask, whether the births are a thing we should be slowing now that I have read what the board does to a group that grows. It is the realest question in the room, because the births are the half of the sum that has kept us off the cull floor since the first morning, and she's the one whose hands they come through. If growing is what ripens a crop, she wants to hear me say whether the children are armor or whether they are the harvest. I do not wave it off. What I give her is the difference the bones taught me, that the crop on the bone world grew tall. One world climbed to its full height in one place where the blade knew exactly where to fall, and that my group grows wide, the numbers in the world scattered across a cluster no single sweep takes at once. The children are not a stalk climbing toward the blade. They are the planting spread too far to reap in one pass, which is the only growth I have read on any world that the field does not seem built to take, and I would rather be that than be the tallest thing in the row. She holds my eye the way she held it the night of the first birth and tells me she wanted to hear me say it before she carried the next one, and that I did. I tell her that is the most useful thing anyone has said to me all night, and I mean it, because she has made me say out loud the one thing I half understood and could not name, that wide is the cedar's growth and tall is the crops, the difference between the bones and the cradle. So we read the world and we take what it gave us, the shape of the thing I have been refusing to ask since the Ore Moon. Then we leave it standing the way we found it. A hemisphere of bones over an empty city, claimed by a beacon that pipes home no resource but the truth. The reading cost us days the colony did not spend claiming a world that feeds it. And I paid that cost on purpose, because a cedar who does not understand the field he grows in is a cedar one step from the bones. I do not regret the days. The thing that breaks the quiet is not the convergence, and it is not the blade, and it is not the truth still settling in my chest. It is Miri, who has stayed up on the relay beside me out of the habit that has the two of us reading the dark when the rest of the group sleeps. Her signal aspect catches a thing on the long edge of the net before my scan does, a contact crossing the cluster that is not a chat line and not a world piping home. She tells me what her aspect feels off it before I have it on the scan, that it is a craft, moving, deliberate, aimed, and that it is not aimed at the bone world where we sit. It is aimed at Sereth. I bring the scan around onto the line she gives me, and I read it for true, a raid craft running hard across the dark toward the home rock. It runs toward the walled room where 2 children breathe, 3 women still carry, and the stores of 2 claimed worlds and the Lodestar engine itself sit on a rock, with most of its people a cluster away reading the dead. Dujiam did not wait for the convergence. He told me the offer stood until the worlds connect, and he counseled me against spreading thin, and while I spread thin over a world of bones, he sent a craft to take the Cedar's engine by force, and it is most of a day ahead of a fleet I now have to turn for home. I tell Nari to wake the crew and bring us about, and I tell Mirai to hold the line on the home rock and start reading what is coming, and now the count is racing something I cannot outrun. Nari brings us about in the time it takes most pilots to decide they cannot, the hull coming off the bone world's orbit and onto the line home before the crew has finished strapping in, and the whole way around I am doing the one arithmetic that matters, which is the gap. The raid craft has most of a day on us. It runs a clean line for Sereth while I run a clean line behind it, and a clean line behind a clean line does not close, the way a second aircraft cleared onto a runway behind the first does not catch the first no matter how I talk to it. I read the 2 tracks against each other from the orbital view, mine and the Raiders, and the read is the coldest thing on my board since the lights went out. Home when it arrives is a thing I cannot do. The best I can do is home a day after it arrives, and a day after is the difference between a colony and a grave. So I do the only thing a man in my seat has ever been able to do, which is fight a battle from the wrong place. The home rock holds Mirai on the relay, Min Hoyun with the mothers and the 2 newborns in the walled room, Chaboram and Kudasam both still carrying, Bake Seal back in the dead ground she taught to grow. 5 of the people I have left on Sereth cannot fight, and the 6th who can is a builder a cluster away in this hull with me. The thinnest crew I have ever left on the rock has a raid coming down on it, and 1 commander to run it, and I will run it from here or not at all. Opening Mirai into the link is the first thing I do the instant the bone world drops behind us, and her voice comes back steady the way it always comes back, which is the thing that lets me start to think. She has the raid craft on her signal aspect already, has had it since before my scan caught it, and what she gives me is the read I cannot get from a day behind. The craft runs heavy, she tells me, not a scout and not a single binder come to talk, but a hold packed full, and the full of it reads wrong to her aspect the way Dude Yom's held channel read wrong over the parlay. Bodies. A craft carrying people, many of them, and the feel of them through her signal is the feel of a thing she has touched once before, which is a group bound. I ask her to be sure, because the answer changes everything I do next, and she is sure. They are people, and they are not Du Guillaume's group, and they are not free. That is the shape of the thing, and it lands in me the way the bones landed, because I understand at once what Du Guillaume has sent, and why he did not come himself. The worlds have not connected. He cannot reach Sereth in the flesh any more than I can reach him. The chat-only distance still holding the way it has held since the first morning, and a commander whose whole aspect binds and drains does not need to come in person when he has a hold full of the bound to spend. Across the cluster he drained other groups to fatten his own, and what runs at my home rock now is the fat of it, people he bound, broke, and aimed, fighting for him because his aspect leaves them no other thing to do. From his green throne world he directs the raid through whatever link binds them to him, and the bodies he is spending to take my engine are not even his own. Du Jiam reaches for the Cedar's expansion engine with a hand made of other people's lives. I tell Mirai what I am going to do before I do it, because she is the only one on the rock who shares the orbital view, and the only one who can hold the thing I am about to build. A wall over Sereth is past me. I have no function that makes a fortress out of a dead rock, and the one wall aspect in my group is in this hull a day behind. What I have is the net. The relay widened into a single net over the parlay. Every aspect in the group joined in it at once instead of one at a time, and I have never once run all of it under fire. Never lifted more than 1 woman through it in a fight. Tonight I am going to lift all of them, the ones on the rock and the ones in this hull, every aspect at once. Miri hears all of it and does not flinch. What she tells me is that holding a net that wide and that hot across that distance is going to cost the relay more than either of us has ever asked it to carry, and that she will carry it and to stop warning her and start using her. I open the net. It snaps together in my view the way it snapped over the green world, except this time it spans a cluster, the hull around me and the rock a day ahead, both threaded into one thing, every warm point in my group lit, joined in reading back to me at once. Cha Boram lights in it, and Minhoon, and Kudasom, and Bexiol, the home crew strung into the same net as Chaewon, Yuna, Jiwoo, and Nari beside me, and at the center of all of it, holding the home half of the link against the distance, Mireille. I feel the cost the instant the net goes wide and hot. The drag of holding that many threads that far through a signal aspect carrying more than it was ever built to carry. And I feel her take it without a word. Then I start reading the board, all of it at once. The raid craft closing on the rock and the rock itself and the people on it. And I begin to build the thing Du Gion did not think a dead rock could build, which is a defense with a commander who saw the whole battle before it started. The first move open to me from a day out is to harden the place itself, before the craft arrives. Cha Boram has been carrying since the first morning, the quiet one whose aspect sat as useless as mine across 7 parts of worlds, that asked for water, metal, and a temper, and never once for what she holds. Her aspect is reinforced, the power to take a structure and make it hold past what it was built to hold. And on a rock with one walled room and a scrubber net and nothing else to strengthen, she has had nothing to lean on. Tonight, the rock is about to be hit, and every wall on it matters, and the time has come for her exactly the way it came for Arium over the ice. I go to her through the link, and I ask her the question that decides the night, whether she can harden the colony, carrying, without the hardening, spending her past her floor. What she tells me is that she can harden what she can touch, the walled room and the scrubber housing and a lander pad, that the cost is real and she will feel it, and that she will call her floor before she crosses it because she has a second life to think of. I tell her that is the most useful thing anyone has said to me since we turned for home, and I find her in the net and I push. Her reinforce answers, and through the satellite net I feel her aspect catch and then go past itself as my reach lands in it. The walled room Chaewon built goes hard. The housing that holds the air goes hard. The pad and the seals in the colony's low rock walls all hardening under a touch she spreads across the whole holding instead of one piece of it. She feels the lift the instant it reaches her. I hear it in the link. The woman who has carried a useless aspect across a season of worlds that did not want it feeling her power widen past her own hands to cover a colony, and her bracing turns from holding off her own doubt to pressing the hardening deeper into the rock. The walled room where 2 children breathe goes hard enough to turn a blow that would have opened it. None of it is a wall around Sereth, because I cannot raise one of those, but a colony hardened from the inside out is a colony that does not break on the first hit, and the first hit is most of a day out and closing. While Boram hardens the rock, I read the raider's line for the thing I most need to know, which is where it means to put its people down. A binder running a hold of bound thralls does not land them across the open rock at random, because the whole of his strength is concentration. Mireille reads the same thing off the craft from the home edge of the net, that it is steadying onto a single approach, aiming for one stretch of the colony to breach and pour through. The walled room is the heart of it. The children, the mothers, and the Lodestar engine itself all clustered against the lee of the rock where Chaewon raised the first shelter 4 parts ago. He has read that heart the way I would have read it, because a binder who takes groups for a living knows exactly where a colony keeps the thing worth taking. There he will breach. The thralls go down at the one stretch of wall that opens onto the heart, spent through it until the heart is his. I read the breach point a day before he reaches it, and I start placing my crew against it the way a dispatcher places aircraft against a runway, which is the only kind of fighting I have ever been good at. Jang Yuna is in this hole with me, the one wall my group owns, a cluster away from the breach she needs to hold. That is the cruelty of the timing, the same cruelty that put my builder and my reader a day from home, on the night the home rock is hit, and I cannot fly her there faster than the hull flies. What I can do is what the net was built for, which is reach where the body cannot. I cannot land Yuna at the breach, but I can land her bulwark there, through the relay, the way I landed the size of her wall on her over the green world, while her body never moved from the clearing. I find her in the net and I tell her what I am going to ask, that she holds a breach she cannot stand at, that she sets her aspect through the link onto the home rock and walls, a gap a cluster away, with a body that stays bolted in a seat beside me. She turns it over with the flat care she turns everything over, and then she tells me she felt every woman in the clearing inside the link the day she held the green world, and that if the link reaches that far it reaches to Sereth, and to stop talking and put her on the wall. So I put her on the wall. I weigh the uplink against the net I am already holding, and the boost on Boram in the distance, and I spend it, and I push Yuna's bulwark down the net and onto the breach point a day ahead of me, her hardened line laid across the gap in the colony's low wall where the raider means to pour through. She cannot feel the rock under her feet, because her feet are in this hull, but the wall lands where I aim it, a held line at the breach raised by hands a cluster away. The craft comes down on Sereth in the deepest part of the night, the way the worst things have always come. And I read all of it from a day out with the net wide and hot. Every one of my people threaded into me. It puts its hold down at the breach exactly where I read it would, and the bound pour out of it onto the rock, more of them than the raid craft looked like it could hold. A tide of people aimed at the one gap in the colony's wall. I have seen a tide before, the pale fauna over the green world, And the read of this one is worse, because these are people bound and drained to husks, and the thing pouring them at my wall sits safe on a green world a cluster off and feels none of it. Yuna's lifted bulwark takes the first of them at the breach, the line she raised through the link holding where her body cannot stand, and the bound break on it and do not get through. They do not break the way the fauna broke, all at once and then drawn off into the dark, because a tide of fauna feels the cost of the wall and a bound thrall does not get to feel anything. Dugium spends them into the breach in waves, and each wave hits the lifted wall, breaks, and the next comes over the bodies of the last, because the binder behind them does not care what they cost, only what they take. I read the waves off the rock through Mireille, through Borum's hardened walls, through Yuna's held line, and I see the thing the raider is counting on. He is sure a wall held through the link from a cluster away must thin eventually, and a net stretched that far must fray, and his whole plan counts on it. The read he came in with is my group is 10 women, a useless aspect, and a commander who cannot fight, and the read is wrong in the one way that decides the night, because he has never once seen the net run at full, so I run it at full. While Yuna holds the breach, I work the rest of the board the way I worked the green world's flank, except now the whole group is in my hand at once. Borum's reinforced stays on the walls, hardening the housing around the breach so the gap does not widen when the wall takes a blow, the structure holding where a softer rock would have crumbled and let the bound through the sides. Behind the line in the walled room I keep Minhaean with the mothers and the 2 newborns, not in the fight, never in the fight, but threaded into the net. Through her I read the heart of the holding the whole time and know the instant anything reaches it, which I will spend everything to keep from happening. I read the breach, the walls, and the heart all at once, holding 3 threads the way I once held the bones in a berth together, 2 aircraft and 1 runway. Each of my people I feed the thing they need a breath before they need it, the surge building before it comes over the wall, the housing leaning before it cracks, the gap thinning before it opens. The net does not fray, it holds, because every thread in it belongs to someone who chose to be in it, and that choosing is what Duguillaume's strength can never buy. That is the truth the night hands me, and it lands while I am holding the breach, not as a thing anyone says but as a thing I read off the 2 sides of the fight. Duguillaume's raid is bigger, more bodies at my wall than I have people in my whole group, and by every figure the board reads the raid should take the rock. A bound thrall fights with exactly the strength the binder pushes into it and not 1 degree more. Borum hardens the rock harder than I asked. Because she wants the children to live, Yuna holds the breach past where a lifted aspect should hold. Because she felt the heart of the colony in the net, Miri carries the link past what the relay was built to carry. Because the alternative is the rock falling. Every thread in my net is pulling toward the same thing of its own will, while every thread in Duguillaume's is pushed toward it by a commander who feels nothing. And the difference between pulled and pushed is the whole battle. The raider feels the net hold and does the thing a binder does when the front does not break, which is throw the whole of his strength into 1 push to crack it. Mireille reads the surge building off the craft before it comes, the bound massing for a single wave aimed at 1 point of the breach, the binder spending everything he has left in his hold to open the gap by weight where he could not open it by waves. She gives me the point of breath before it lands, the exact stretch of wall the push is aimed at, and I have a breath to answer it. Yuna's lifted bulwark is already at its widest, and Borum's reinforce is already deep in the housing, and a wave that heavy takes the breach if I only hold what I am holding. So I do not only hold, I find the breath the dispatcher always finds, the smallest spend that does the job, and I aim a drop. This is what the precision drop the ice world bought me was made for, and I feel the difference the moment I aim it. I cannot drop a weapon, because the Lodestar does not arm anyone, and I would not aim one at people Duguillaume bound against their will if I could. What I drop is mass, a cache aimed onto the breach itself, set down exactly at the point Mireille the surge aiming for. Sealed reserve and worked plate and the dense scrap of 2 claimed worlds dropped its speed onto the 1 stretch of wall the heaviest wave is about to hit. Down out of the dark it comes onto Sereth a day's flight ahead of me, landing in the breath before the surge reaches it, and the bound wave that should have cracked the gap by weight breaks on a wall that just got mass, a hardened housing, and a held bulwark at once. The push fails. Whatever Duguillaume had left in his hold spends itself against the breach and does not open it, and the binder a cluster away feels his 1 crack-the-wall surge break on a barren rock. And I read the moment it breaks off the craft through Mireille, the raid losing the shape it came in with. After the surge fails, the raid comes apart, because a binder who throws everything at 1 wall and does not breach it has nothing left to push with. The bound at the breach falter, the hand pushing them run dry, the uplink of a binder spent the way mine spends, and a thrall the binder cannot push is a thrall that stops. Mari reads the raid craft pulling its hold back off the rock, the binder cutting his losses, gathering what bound he has left and breaking off before the rock he could not take, costs him more of the strength he came to grow. I do not chase it. There is no craft at the rock to chase with, and no wish in me to spend my people hunting a beaten raider across the dark, and the bound he pulls back are people I would free and not kill if the worlds had connected enough to reach them. So I let him go, and I hold the colony hard until the craft is gone for true. When it is gone, I read the heart of the colony the first thing, before the walls and before the count, because the heart is what the whole night was for. Min Haeun's voice comes through the link from the walled room, steadier than I have any right to expect from someone who kept the mothers and 2 newborns calm behind a breach all night, telling me the children are whole, and the mothers are whole, and the room held. That walled room, the one Chaewon built 4 parts ago and Borum hardened tonight, stood through a raid aimed straight at it, the 2 newborns breathing the green world's thick air on a rock a binder could not take. I sit in the orbital view a day from home, and let it land the way I let the first birth land. All the whole battle was for held by hands a cluster away from mine. The breach held, so did the heart. A rock the chat still calls dead turned the first real attack the cluster ever threw at it, and not one life on my board went into the ground. Then I find Myrae in the net, because the link is still wide and still hot, and I can feel what it is taking from her, and what I find is a woman past her floor and holding anyway. She carried the home half of the net all night, every thread of it run through her signal aspect across a cluster. Every thread I lifted and every reed I pulled passing through the relay she held. That weight she carried past the point I began to take from her, past the point I would have called her floor if she had let me see it. She kept it behind the link the way I keep the half-guesses in the drawer, the strain hidden under a steady voice while the net stayed up, because she worked out before I did that the moment she called her floor and let the link narrow, the breach would open. I read the full cost only now that the raid is gone, and the reading sits in me longer than the wind does. A woman who spent herself on the relay without a word, and would have gone past the point of real harm if the raid had run 1 wave longer. So I tell her to let it down, that the raid is gone and the rock is whole and the net can come down now. And she lets it down by degrees the way she lets everything down, slow, watching it close clean, and I feel the cost ease out of her thread as the net narrows. She is quiet a moment after, the way she is quiet when her aspect has carried something she is still feeling the weight of, and then she tells me the thing she will say, and not the thing I read, which is that the link held, that the rock held, that she is fine. I do not tell her what I read. What I tell her is the truth I am sure of, that the net held because she held it, that the boost I lifted and the wall Una raised and the rock Borum hardened would none of them have reached the home rock without the relay she carried. She is quiet again, and then she tells me she knew I would read it, and that she held it anyway, and that she would rather I knew what the link cost than have me think the net came free. I tell her that is the most useful thing anyone has said to me all night, and for once the dry shape I say it in is not enough for what I mean. She catches the rest of it off my silence before I shape a word of it, and neither of us says the rest of it, because the rest of it does not need saying, and the night is not the place for it. The Lodestar pays out the held net only after the spending is done, the reward landing while the net is still narrowing out of Miri's hand. What reaches me is a new function, the first since the deep mode woke over the bones, something well past drop or relay or any wider reach of what I already hold, and the read of it unrolls while I hold it. Running the whole group as one network under fire, lifting every aspect at once across a cluster, and holding the line through a raid aimed at the heart. The system marks the held defense the way it marks every survived danger. What it gives me is what the green world, the ice world, and the bones never asked for, which is a wall, shield, an orbital defense I can raise over a claim, a thing the Lodestar holds from above. The way Una holds a breach from the front, the function a colony that just took its first raid needs more than any function the worlds have offered me yet. I file it with the others quietly, and I do not miss the bitter joke in it, that the system handed me a wall the night after the raid I had to hold without one, the eyes to defend a holding given to me the same hour I learned the holding could be hit. The night gets laid out for the group when the fleet sets down on Sereth a day later, on the rock and across the link both. Over a ration nobody counts, because a raid that came for the heart of the colony is not a thing I get to hold behind my teeth. They hear it plainly, who came and why. A raid craft Do Guillaume sent ahead of the convergence packed with a group he bound and drained, spent at my wall to take the Cedar's engine by force while he sat safe on a world a cluster off, and felt nothing of it. I do not soften the part that matters, which is that we held, and that we held because the net ran at full at last, and every aspect in it pulled the same way. Una, who held a breach she could not stand at, tells the group the bound fought with no will in them, nothing behind the bodies but the hand pushing them, and that her wall felt more like herself than it ever has because the whole group was in it with her. Myrae says little, because Myrae always says little, and what she says is that the net held, and I do not add to it the part I read, because that part is hers to carry and mine to know.